Chapter 346. The news of a treasure appearing in Mount Diang was quickly spread by Qin Yun and the others through the West Chu caravans. This was also because Chu Xiu did not stop them and deliberately caused this to happen. After the great calamity of ancient times, countless relics and treasures had appeared in Jianghu. Most of the people in Jianghu had even figured out whether there were treasures among them. Due to the circulation of some information from ancient times, most of the ruins were able to roughly deduce the origins of the ruins not long after they appeared. Then, they would analyze whether there were any treasures in the ruins and finally decide what level of experts to send to fight for it. Otherwise, experts at the level of Wu Dao Grand Master would have something to do. Even if they had free time, they would still delay their own cultivation. This time, some forces around Mount Diang did not find anything special after hearing about the appearance of the Tong Tian Tower. It seemed that Mount Diang did not have any top forces in the past. Moreover, this matter was spread by some small characters. There was no detailed information, so it was not worth making a big fuss about. However, although they wouldn't make a big fuss about it, the people who heard about it wouldn't be indifferent. Even if they sent some people to take a look, it would still be good to test the waters. What if they were lucky and there really was something good inside? For so many years, most of the forces in the Jianghu had done this, and some rogue martial artists and small sects would join in the fun. For them, it didn't matter if the things inside were good or bad, as long as they got a chance, they would never be able to get enough of it. Therefore, in just 2 days, many individual cultivators and people from some small forces who happened to hear the news nearby came. At this time, on Mount Diang, a large area of land had cracked, and a strange round tower broke out of the ground, revealing a height of several feet. In the past, most towers had been square, but this Tower of Babel was round. It also represented that the sky was round and the earth was square, and it could reach the heavens. The appearance of the Tong Tian Tower was extremely huge, with a radius of several hundred feet, and this was only the appearance. There was a space formation inside, which was even more huge. The entire Tong Tian Tower was made of a kind of white stone. It was unknown whether it was because of the formation or the material, but the Tong Tian Tower shone with a thick layer of white light. Even in the daytime, it was exceptionally dazzling. With so many people here, this time, Chu Xiu didn't let anyone seal off the Tower of Babel. Right now, only some small characters had come, so sealing them would still be of some use. However, if some important figures came later, and Chu Xiu wanted to seal them, then he would have to fight with them before the Tower of Skysplit opened. Victory or defeat aside, he would definitely suffer a loss. Without Chu Xiu's blockade, Qin Yun and the others hastily made their way to Mount Diang. They hid in the crowd as they watched Chu Xiu, sneering inwardly. "Aren't you very arrogant, Chu Xiu?" Now that more and more people had come, it had to let go of Mount Diang and let the others in. Moreover, after learning that the relic turned out to be the Tower of Skysplit, Qin Yun and the others were very excited. The appearance of Skysplit Tower ruins could be traced. Throughout history, there had already been several Skysplit Towers that had appeared. Excluding the few that had been completely destroyed, there were still many good treasures left. Although those top sects didn't care too much about them, for these rogue martial artists and martial artists that came from small forces, they could be called precious treasures. Just obtaining one of these treasures could change their destiny. At this time, the situation on Mount Diang was a bit delicate. Chu Xiu was standing in front of the main entrance of the Tower of Skysplit, which was the best position. As long as the Tower of Skysplit opened, he would definitely have the upper hand. When the others saw this scene, they rolled their eyes and had some ideas. A short and fat middle-aged man wearing a black flowery robe walked out. He cupped his hands towards Chu Xiu and said with a smile, "I am Yin Luohua of the Shu land of West Chu. I have long heard of official Chu's reputation in the Jianghu. This time, I have specially come to get to know you." Seeing this short and fat middle-aged man, the people present immediately whispered. This person's reputation in the West Chu land was not small. Three-Poison Devil Finger Yin Luohua was considered a character among the rogue cultivators of West Chu. He was a famous unity of the world realm martial artist. This person came from a humble background and didn't have a strong inheritance. The only thing that stood out was that he had refined 3 fingers on his left hand into poison fingers. He had absorbed countless poisons and could even corrode qi. Those who touched it would even have their internal organs and meridians corroded by the poison. So even if a martial artist was stronger than his opponent, they were not willing to fight to the death with him. This was because even if they killed their opponent, as long as they were hit by Yin Luohua's poisoned fingers, they would have to pay a great price to expel the poison. It was not worth it at all. So in the West Chu land, this fellow was like a fly. Although his strength wasn't at the peak, no one was willing to fight with him. No matter what they encountered, as long as Yin Luohua didn't go too far, most people were not willing to become hostile with him. At this time, Yin Luohua stood out to get close to Chu Xiu. His goal was very clear. He wanted to stand in Chu Xiu's position. Of course, Yin Luohua didn't want to drive Chu Xiu away. He just wanted to take the initiative with Chu Xiu. Although this place wasn't considered the territory of the Guanzhong torture room, it was said that Chu Xiu had already included this place into his territory. A strong dragon couldn't suppress a snake in its territory. This place was too close to the Guanzhong torture room, so Yin Luohua didn't want to suppress Chu Xiu, who was half a snake in his territory. Moreover, the news of Chu Xiu killing a Unity of the World Realm expert was widely spread. Although Yin Luohua had the strength of the Unity of the World Realm, he really didn't want to make a move against Chu Xiu at this time. Chu Xiu looked at Yin Luohua's figure walking over with a smile that wasn't a smile on his face. He said, "What did you just say? Get to know each other? Are you worthy?" Yin Luohua's footsteps immediately stopped and his face darkened as he said, "Chu Xiu, what do you mean?" The smile on Chu Xiu's face disappeared and he said with an expressionless face, "Is my meaning not clear enough? I'm saying you're not worthy. I'll have to trouble you to find out what kind of people are qualified to be my, Chu Xiu's friends. What kind of people are qualified to be my, Chu Xiu's enemies. You rely on underhanded methods to make others not dare move against you. You're like a toad and a fly, yet you dare to try to get close to me? Are you worthy?" Chu Xiu's words were extremely insulting. Not to mention Yin Luohua being a famous person in the West Chu land, even a small character wouldn't be able to endure it. But some people thought about it and realized that what Chu Xiu said was the truth. In the past, during the God Weapon Conference, the people that were friends with Chu Xiu were Mo Tianlin, Luo Feiheng, and Xie Xiaolu. As for Chu Xiu's opponents, they were all on the same level as Xiehou Wujiang. Although Yin Luohua had the cultivation of the Unity of the World Realm, he couldn't compare to these people at all. His reputation wasn't that good either. To put it bluntly, not to mention becoming friends with Chu Xiu, he didn't even have the qualifications to be enemies with Chu Xiu. At this time, Yin Luohua's face turned red from Chu Xiu's words. His heart was already filled with rage. In any case, he was considered a top figure in the West Chu land, and there were so many people here who knew him. Now that he was being insulted by Chu Xiu, if he continued to endure it, he would probably be laughed at for the rest of his life. Yin Luohua took a step forward, and his body was surrounded by a dark green aura. He shouted coldly, "Chu Xiu, you're going too far. Don't think that you can look down on us seniors in the pugilistic world just because you're in the top 10 of the Longhu list. I only befriended you because I gave you face. If I didn't give you face, who do you think you are?" As soon as he finished speaking, Yin Luohua raised his left hand, which had always been shrouded in his wide sleeves. His middle finger, index finger, and ring finger simply didn't look like human fingers. They were pitch black like ink, and there were also ferocious blood-red sharp nails on them, just like those of a wild beast. Yin Luohua's unconventional cultivation method was equivalent to harming others and himself. Basically, he would never be able to break through to the martial Dao Grandmaster level in this lifetime. Of course, for a rogue cultivator like him, being able to step into the Unity of the World Realm was already extremely lucky, not to mention becoming a martial Dao Grandmaster. Yin Luohua's index finger pointed out, and the black poison mist and demonic qi roared out. The aura chi actually condensed into the shape of an evil spirit that wrapped around his left arm, looking extremely shocking. Yin Luohua's own strength wasn't that strong, and the strength of his aura chi wasn't much stronger than the old and frail Wei family ancestor and Zhang Wanshan. The most troublesome part of his finger was the poison that erupted from his finger. It could corrode qi and corrode internal organs and meridians, so it was impossible to defend against it. Yin Luohua didn't even have an antidote for this poison. Although he wouldn't die immediately after being poisoned, it wasn't easy to expel the poison. This time, Yin Luohua used the 3-poison demonic finger. It seemed like he hated Chu Xiu for humiliating him before, so he didn't care about Chu Xiu's identity as a member of the Guanzhong torture room. After getting the treasure, he would return to West Chu, so where would the Guanzhong torture room find him? At this time, Chu Xiu's mouth revealed a cold smile. He formed a seal with his hand, and when the fist landed, it immediately blossomed with a holy light. Perfect Aquarius seal. The blinding radiance collided with the jet black, jade-green poisonous finger, and everyone heard a miserable howl. Yin Luohua's index finger had actually been smashed apart by Chu Xiu's powerful, perfect Aquarius seal. However, although Yin Luohua's index finger was shattered and even twisted beyond shape, the dark green poison mist directly broke through the powerful force of the perfect Aquarius seal and directly exploded into Chu Xiu's hands. In almost an instant, Chu Xiu's arms had already turned pitch black. Chapter 347. The exchange between Chu Xiu and Yin Luohua had caused the eyes of everyone present to twitch. The strength of these two people was truly astonishing. A single exchange had resulted in a situation where both sides were heavily injured. Chu Xiu's Buddhist seal technique directly shattered one of Yin Luohua's fingers. It seemed that he would not be able to recover. From now on, his nickname would become Double Poison Devil Finger. On the other hand, Chu Xiu was also at a disadvantage. Both of his arms were contaminated with Yin Luohua's poison. It would be impossible for him to participate in the fight for Tong Tian Tower. Although Yin Luohua lost one of his fingers, he still had 2 fingers. In this way, Chu Xiu was at a greater disadvantage. However, from this point of view, Chu Xiu really had the strength to fight against a unity of heaven and man realm martial artist. But this time, he encountered Yin Luohua, who was difficult even for martial artists of the same level. It could only be said that Chu Xiu was unlucky. However, at this time, Chu Xiu formed the inner lion seal in his hand. While suppressing his body, the glazed gold thread goo in his body suddenly burst out with a strange golden light, directly expelling the poison in his body. Chu Xiu shook his hand, and 2 streams of pitch-black blood sprayed out. When it landed on the ground, it immediately gave off a white smoke. The glazed gold thread goo was the supreme goo of Miaojiang moon-worshipping cult. Its original form was several kinds of powerful poisonous insects. It could be said that it could suppress most poisons. Not to mention that Chu Xiu had the inner lion seal technique that could suppress his own injuries. Seeing that Chu Xiu could so easily expel Yin Luohua's poison from his body, and only lost a little bit of qi and blood, everyone present sucked in a breath of cold air. Was this Chu Xiu immune to poison? Looking at the flabbergasted Yin Luohua, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "I've said it before. You're not worthy of being friends with me. Now that you've seen the outcome, do you still think you're worthy?" Yin Luohua's complexion was already as black as his poison demon finger, but at this time, he really did not dare to continue challenging Chu Xiu. One of the 3 poison demon fingers that he had relied on to become famous had actually been smashed by Chu Xiu today. This had already made his heart bleed. If he were to attack again, it was still unknown whether he would be able to keep the other 2 fingers. In the past, he had always used the power of his poison demon finger to intimidate others. He did not expect that he would be completely defeated by Chu Xiu today. Thinking of this, Yin Luohua could only retreat unwillingly. He even seemed to hear someone mocking him from behind. At this moment, a cold voice rang out, "If he isn't worthy to be your enemy, then what about I?" As the voice rang out, a martial artist in his 60s wearing a lake blue robe separated the crowd and walked over. Behind him were more than 10 Xiantian, inner aura, and outer aura realm disciples. This person's aura was very strong, and the gang energy around him seemed to be flashing with sharp sword qi. His face was very elegant and gentle, like a teacher in a private school. However, his eyes carried a trace of cold electricity, and people who looked at him could not help but feel a chill in their hearts. Just based on his aura alone, this person was already several times stronger than Yin Luohua. Feeling the hostility from this person, Chu Xiu could not help but frown and ask, "Who are you?" Chu Xiu dared to guarantee that he had absolutely not seen this martial artist in the unity of heaven and man realm before. Even the aura on this person was very unfamiliar. However, Chu Xiu could see the intense hatred and murderous intent in the other party's eyes. This person was definitely someone who had a karmic conflict with him. However, the number of people Chu Xiu had killed was a little too many. As a result, even Chu Xiu himself had no idea how many people he had offended. The sword-wielding martial artist said coldly, "I am Ba Mountain Sword Sect's Teacherson. Chu Xiu, you killed my disciple, but now you don't even recognize me?" Hearing this, the people present were in an uproar. This person was the elder of Ba Mountain Sword Sect, Sorrowful Autumn Poem, Teacherson. Because Mount Diang was close to the southwest of West Chu and the southeast of Eastern Qi, these two places had the most martial artists present. But Mount Diang was on the border of West Chu, so the West Chu martial artists were more numerous. They had naturally heard of this famed elder of Ba Mountain Sword Sect. Teacherson's background was quite legendary. He only officially started cultivating martial arts in his 30s. Before he started cultivating martial arts, he was really a teacher in a private school. Because his surname was Tsen, the students respectfully addressed him as Teacher Cien. In reality, his real name was naturally not Teacher Cien. Later, due to a great change in his family, Teacherson was accidentally saved by the people of Ba Mountain Sword Sect, and also accidentally joined the Ba Mountain Sword Sect. Everyone knew that it was important to build a solid foundation in martial arts from childhood. But Teacherson had only started cultivating halfway, and it was already good that he could even start. But who would have thought that Teacherson's talent was so great? Even though he had missed the best period of cultivation, his cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds, even faster than some young disciples. As a result, Teacherson quickly stepped into the realm of unity of heaven and human, and became an elder of Ba Mountain Sword Sect. But it was a pity that the step of martial arts grandmaster did not rely on talent. It also required enlightenment and accumulation. What Teacherson lacked was the accumulation from childhood and youth. This caused him to have almost no chance of becoming a martial arts grandmaster in this life. But fortunately, Teacherson did not place too much importance on that realm. In these years, as an elder of Ba Mountain Sword Sect, Teacherson had taught many disciples. Among them, Zhang Baitao, who had been killed by Chu Xiu, was the one who had left the deepest impression on him. Zhang Baitao was not the most talented among his disciples, but he was the most hard-working one. Teacherson admired this. Last time, when Zhang Baitao had gone home to visit his family, Teacherson had secretly given Zhang Baitao some good things for him to give to his father. But Teacherson had never thought that his most beloved disciple would disappear without a trace. When Teacherson had asked the people of Wind Sweeping Building to investigate, he found out that Zhang Baitao had died at the hands of Chu Xiu. In the past, Teacherson did not have the opportunity to travel from West Chu to Northern Yan to find Chu Xiu for revenge. But now, the enemy who had killed his disciple was right in front of him. This time, Teacherson could not hold back. Chu Xiu thought for a while and finally remembered who the person in front of him was. "You are that Zhang Baitao's master?" "Sorry, I really did not know. Too many people have died in my hands. If I had to write down the names of every single one of them, wouldn't I be too busy?" A murderous glint appeared in Teacherson's eyes. Purple light flashed in his hand as he gripped the hilt of his sword. But at this time, a disciple behind him pulled on Teacherson's sleeve and said in a low voice, "Master, don't be rash. After we enter the Tower of Babel, we will take revenge for junior brother. If we act now, we will only be a joke to others." This time, Teacherson had brought his disciple to travel the martial world. Coincidentally, he had heard the news that a treasure had appeared on Mount Diyang, so he had rushed over. He did not expect to meet Chu Xiu. Teacherson was usually very calm, but today, he had seen the enemy who had killed his disciple, so he was a little rash. He looked around and saw that everyone else was waiting to watch a good show. In their opinion, Chu Xiu and Teacherson were both from great forces and powerful existences. It would be best for them to have a life and death battle here. If one of them died, there would be one less, and they would have a better chance. Teacherson loosened his grip on his sword, but at this time, a voice sneered. Your Ba Mountain Sword sect really has no guts. He killed your disciple, but you are still hesitating here. Two people walked out of the crowd, both wearing embroidered robes and a crown. The younger one was Xiahou Wujiang, and the older one was a middle-aged man at the unity of heaven and man realm. At this time, Xiahou Wujiang had also stepped into the 5 Qis towards the origin realm. This surprised Chu Xiu greatly. It was not that Chu Xiu looked down on Xiahou Wujiang, but it was because his path was different from Xiahou Wujiang's. Chu Xiu walked the path of battle and killing. It was easier to break through in fierce battles of life and death. Xiahou Shi mainly cultivated the imperial spirit art, and the growth of her mental power was much slower than the cultivation of her inner strength and physical body. But now, Xiahou Wujiang had also stepped into the 5 Qis towards the origin realm. This speed was very terrifying. Looking at Chu Xiu, Xiahou Wujiang's eyes bloomed with murderous intent and coldness. Last time, he had suffered a great loss at the hands of Chu Xiu. His maidservant, Chan had been killed, and this matter had been known by the entire underworld. This had caused his reputation to plummet, and he had caused countless troubles. In the end, he had been grounded by his father. But no matter what, his father Xiahou Zhen was the patriarch of the Xiahou clan, and he still felt sorry for him. Although he ordered Xiahou Wujiang to go into seclusion to reflect, he specially found a treasure that could increase mental power. He gave Xiahou Wujiang the great sun's epiphyllum that bloomed every 100 years at noon to refine it. Finally, he stepped into the 5 Qis towards the origin realm. Only then did Xiahou Wujiang come out. But while Xiahou Wujiang's grounding was lifted, Xiahou Zhen was still worried about his son. He was worried that he would cause trouble again, so he sent a trusted martial artist to follow him. In name, it was protection, but in reality, it was surveillance. This martial artist at the unity of heaven and man realm would not listen to Xiahou Wujiang for everything. Once Xiahou Wujiang did something dangerous, this martial artist would step in to stop him. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes at Xiahou Wujiang and said indifferently, "So it's you. This time, you're not hiding in the dark and scheming, and you're attacking openly? Last time, I said that if you want to play, I'll play with you to the end. Xiahou Wujiang, you still have the nerve to say that others have no guts. In fact, you have no guts either. You hid in the dark and didn't show up, letting a woman take the lead. After I killed her, you didn't even dare to let out a fart. Tell me, aren't you very gutless? Chu Xiu. You're courting death." Xiahou Wujiang took a step forward, and the mysterious aura around him dissipated. He looked at Chu Xiu with a ferocious killing intent. But before he could make a move, a deafening roar came from the foot of the mountain. "Chu Xiu. Today, I must kill you as a sacrifice to senior brother Hang Shan's soul in heaven." Hearing this voice, everyone present was stunned. How many people did this Chu Xiu offend? Why did everyone have a grudge against him? Chu Xiu also frowned. He felt that he seemed to be a little unlucky at this time. In the original plot, he did not know who the people who came to the Skysplit Tower this time were, but it could not be so coincidental that they were all his enemies, right? Who were the people who came this time? Chapter 348. The person who was clamoring to kill Chu Xiu was a middle-aged monk in his 40s. He wore a moon-white robe and had a tall stature. He was at the 5 Qis origin realm. At this moment, his face was filled with anger and murderous intent. His desire to kill Chu Xiu was even greater than that of Tichertsen and Xiahou Wujiang. However, the moment they saw this monk, everyone gasped and exclaimed, "It's someone from the Great Light Temple." The monks of the Great Light Temple would have a golden swastika imprint on their robes and kasaya. The outer layer was inlaid with a golden ring, representing the light of the great sun. Among the northern and southern Buddhist sects, in terms of power, the Great Light Temple was even greater than the Subodhi Monastery. This Chu Xiu was truly audacious to the extreme. He even dared to kill a disciple of the Great Light Temple. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "There are many people in this world who want to kill me. Who do you think you are? However, I don't think I've killed a monk from the Great Light Temple. If you want to take revenge on me, you have to find the right person." The monk who suddenly appeared was Ming Chen, the martial monk instructor of the Vajra courtyard, one of the 6 martial courtyards of the Great Light Temple. In the past, when Chu Xiu was carrying out a mission as an assassin of the Blue Dragon Society, he had killed an old monk named Heng Shan. That old monk was a friend of Ming Chen's. Although he was not from the Great Light Temple, he was still Ming Chen's senior. Although Chu Xiu was an assassin of the Blue Dragon Society at that time, it was not up to him to choose who he wanted to kill when carrying out a mission. However, it was clear that Ming Chen had already placed the blame on Chu Xiu. When the news of Heng Shan's death first came, Ming Chen had already wanted to seek revenge on Chu Xiu. However, at that time, Chu Xiu was still an assassin of the Blue Dragon Society, and the head of the Blue Dragon Society, Bu Tiannan, had just fought with the people of the Great Light Temple. The relationship between the two parties was more sensitive, so Ming Chen was stopped by his master and had endured until today. This time, Ming Chen had cultivated to the 5 Qis origin realm and was ordered to go down the mountain to find talented disciples for the Great Light Temple. He had heard several rumors about Chu Xiu in the Jianghu and could not help but come to the Guanzhong torture room. If Tichertsen and Xiahou Wujiang came here because of the appearance of the Skirich Tower and accidentally met Chu Xiu here, then Ming Chen could be said to have deliberately come to make trouble for Chu Xiu. Ming Chen said hatefully, "Chu Xiu, have you forgotten the Yao village of the Northern Yan? In the past, you were an assassin of the Blue Dragon Society and killed countless people in the Northern Yan land. Your hands were stained with blood." Yao Nanshan was about to retire from the Jianghu, but your Blue Dragon Society did not let him go and exterminated him during the Golden Basin washing ceremony. Because my senior martial brother Heng Shan also participated in the Golden Basin washing ceremony, he was massacred by you villains. Shouldn't I seek revenge from you? In the past, Chu Xiu was an assassin of the Blue Dragon Society. This was known by many people in the Jianghu. However, they did not expect that Chu Xiu had such a glorious battle record in the past. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Yao village. You are here to seek revenge for that meddling old monk Heng Shan? What a joke. The Blue Dragon Society is just a sword in someone else's hand. It is not that the Blue Dragon Society did not want to let Yao Nanshan go, but that the person who hired the Blue Dragon Society did not want to let Yao Nanshan go. As for that old monk Heng Shan, it is even more ridiculous. The Blue Dragon Society's target was not him, but he jumped out to meddle in other people's business and died. Who can he blame? Back then, there were many people who participated in the Golden Basin washing ceremony. Why did that old monk Heng Shan die? Wasn't it because he was meddling in other people's business? When Chu Xiu said this, everyone present felt that it was very reasonable. However, to Ming Chen, Chu Xiu's words were a provocation and an insult to senior brother Heng Shan. Ming Chen released a golden aura around his body. He looked at Chu Xiu and said in a deep voice, "In the past, Master told me to consider the big picture and not to seek revenge on you. The guardian warrior's angry gaze is to suppress evil and slay devils. Killing one person to save 10, not to fight for revenge. But now, it seems that Master was wrong. All these years, countless innocent people have died in the hands of you, Chu Xiu. Although you are not of the demonic path, your methods are more cruel and ruthless than those martial artists of the demonic path. Today, I am killing you not only to pay tribute to senior brother Heng Shan's spirit in heaven, but also to get rid of a scourge like you for the people of the martial world. Killing one of you can save thousands of people. As soon as he finished speaking, Ming Chen did not say anything else. His body flashed with a dazzling golden light, and he threw a punch at Chu Xiu with the roar of a dragon and a tiger. The Great Light Temple's secret technique, the dragon-taming tiger fist. For others, the sky-reaching tower was still very attractive. Even Teachertsen, an elder from the Ba Mountain Sword sect, felt the same. But for Ming Chen, who came from the Great Light Temple, he did not care about the cultivation methods and treasures in the sky-reaching tower. Even if it was the sky-reaching sect of the ancient times, their heritage might not be stronger than that of the Great Light Temple. So Ming Chen did not care about the sky-reaching tower at all. This time, he came to find Chu Xiu for revenge. Moreover, when he said that he would kill Chu Xiu to get rid of the scourge of the martial world, it was not just high-sounding words, but what he really thought in his heart. Ming Chen came from the Vajra courtyard of the 6 major martial courtyards of the Great Light Temple, and the cultivation method he cultivated was the famous, Furious Vajra Heart Sutra of the Great Light Temple. After cultivating it to great success, his body became extremely strong, like the guardian Vajra of Buddhism. His eyes were angry, and he could destroy evil and kill demons. It was an extremely powerful body cultivation method. However, this cultivation method was a bit extreme. Although the Furious Vajra Heart Sutra was angry, if it was because of killing or hatred, then it would be walking on the evil path. It would stimulate one's own anger and lead to chi deviation. So to cultivate the Furious Vajra Heart Sutra, one must have the skills of a Vajra and the heart of a Buddha. Now that Ming Chen wanted to kill Chu Xiu, although the main purpose was to take revenge for Hengshan, he himself thought that he was getting rid of the scourge of the martial world. Previously, when he wanted to kill Chu Xiu in the northern Yan, he was stopped by his master, which caused Chu Xiu to kill so many people in the martial world in the future. Now, he wanted to make sure that Chu Xiu would not be able to continue doing evil. When the people present saw that Ming Chen actually attacked directly, without any regard for the consequences, they were also stunned. They thought to themselves that the Great Light Temple was indeed the leader of the Buddhist sect, and they were extremely decisive and bold in their actions. However, this was also what they were happy to see happen. After all, Chu Xiu was currently occupying a good position. If he was really killed by Ming Chen, everyone would applaud and celebrate. Although Chu Xiu had the ability to fight against some of the weaker oneness of heaven and human realm, this did not mean that he was truly invincible in the 5 Chi's origin realm. Some existences in the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard and some experts who had accumulated a lot of experience in the 5 Chi's origin realm could still hurt him, such as the current Ming Chen. Ming Chen was a core disciple of the Great Light Temple and the martial monk instructor of the Vajra Yard. His own ability did not need to be mentioned. Based on his inheritance alone, he was more powerful than Chu Xiu. When this punch landed, the roar of a dragon and the roar of a tiger erupted. Its might was not inferior to Chu Xiu's perfect Aquarius seal. If it was Yin Luohua, he would probably have one of his fingers shattered. At this moment, the expression of Yin Luohua, who was standing at the side and watching the battle, also changed. Although he was not a frog at the bottom of a well, he was a lone cultivator after all, so he did not have much knowledge. Previously, when Chu Xiu's seal shattered one of his fingers, he was already shocked. Now that he saw Ming Chen's punch, he was still a little frightened. Today, he finally understood that things like realms did not represent combat power. Although some people's realms were weaker than his, their combat power was so terrifying that it was abnormal. At this moment, in the face of Ming Chen's punch, a cold light flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. Along the way, he had indeed offended a lot of people in the underworld. However, those who could reach a high position all had piles of bones under their feet. When would there be an end to revenge? The simplest way was to completely wipe out the other party's lineage and kill until the other party could not find anyone to take revenge on you. Then, the grudge would be considered resolved. Chu Xiu did not want to provoke the Great Light Temple, which was one of the northern and southern Buddhist sects. He killed Hengshan, and Ming Chen came to take revenge on him. If he killed Ming Chen now, would Ming Chen's master come to take revenge on him in the future? These were all things that could happen, but Chu Xiu did not care so much. If someone wanted to kill him, he would kill them. Some things in the underworld were sometimes so simple, and compromise had never been Chu Xiu's style. Therefore, the moment Ming Chen attacked, Chu Xiu also attacked. Moreover, he used a killing move right from the start, without holding back. With one step, Chu Xiu's murderous intent shot up into the sky. Impressively, he had already stepped into the selfless killing realm. The devil's blade of Avicii slashed out, and the black demonic aura combined with the blood-refined divine power. The devil's blade of Avicii slashed out with a trace of divinity, and the surging demonic aura and murderous intent exploded, causing the wind to howl angrily, and there was a faint sound of ghosts crying and gods howling. The power of Chu Xiu's blade shocked everyone present. Yin Luohua was rejoicing that Chu Xiu did not explode with such power just now. Otherwise, the price he had to pay would not be as simple as losing a finger. Tichertsen's expression was also solemn. This Chu Xiu's combat strength was beyond his expectations. If it were him, could he win against Chu Xiu? On the other hand, Xiahou Wujiang's expression was somewhat ugly. In the past, he had fought with Chu Xiu at the God Weapon Convention. Only a short time had passed, and this Chu Xiu's strength had skyrocketed to such an extent. Could it be that he had obtained some kind of opportunity? Unlike the others who were shocked by the power of Chu Xiu's blade, when he saw the power of Chu Xiu's blade, Ming Chen was even more determined to kill Chu Xiu. In his view, with such a murderous intent, how could a person who could cultivate demonic martial arts to such a level be a good person? He must be a demon whose hands were stained with blood. Killing Chu Xiu was rewarded with good karma. Killing people was also saving people. When the exploding golden gang chi collided with Chu Xiu's blade, suddenly the roar of dragons and tigers resounded. The demonic aura continued to roar, and bursts of violent fluctuations erupted. Chapter 349. The people of Jianghu all thought that Daoist martial artists paid the most attention to their foundations, but in reality, Buddhist martial artists paid even more attention to their foundations than Daoist martial artists. When Daoist martial artists gained enlightenment, their understanding of the state of mind was even above the accumulation of their own realm. This was the so-called, once you gain enlightenment, you will soar to the heavens. As for Buddhist martial artists, especially those from the Great Light Temple, they paid particular attention to progressing step by step. First, they would recite Buddhist scriptures to cultivate their mind, then they would train their muscles and bones, and finally, they would be taught some secret techniques of the Buddhist sect. Therefore, very few people in Jianghu would be able to see young Buddhist disciples roaming the Jianghu, and many times, the disciples of the Great Light Temple would not even appear on the Longhu leaderboard. When the young martial artists of other sects roamed the Jianghu, the young disciples of the Great Light Temple were still cultivating in the temple, training their muscles and bones. On this generation's Longhu leaderboard, the Great Light Temple even produced a wisdom king, Zongxian, which was already considered a rare occurrence. It could only be said that Zongxian's talent was amazing. Therefore, as long as one was a disciple of the Great Light Temple who was qualified to roam the Jianghu, their strength would definitely be extraordinary. It could be said that even the most ordinary disciple would be of a much higher quality than the same level martial artists of other sections. Ming Chen was the martial monk instructor of the Vajra institution, so he was not an ordinary disciple. Using his fist to meet the saber, in the midst of the endless golden Buddhist light and demonic chi exploding, Chu Xiu's extremely sharp saber directly tore through Ming Chen's Buddhist light, and with a loud bang, it directly chopped onto his fist. However, when the saber was about to reach his body, Ming Chen's fist bloomed with a layer of seemingly solid golden light. His entire face became extremely solemn, as if he had been possessed by Vajra. A violent clanging sound was heard, and Chu Xiu's saber seemed to have chopped onto a blunt object, almost producing sparks. Everyone present looked at Ming Chen with even more shocked gazes. This monk was actually using his physical body to forcefully resist a 6th transformation supreme-grade precious weapon. Was he still human? Xiahou Wujiang frowned and said, "The monks of the Great Light Temple are so fierce? 7th uncle, can you beat him?" The person that Xiahou Wujiang called 7th uncle wasn't Xiahou Wujiang's real 7th uncle, and he wasn't a member of the Xiahou clan either. Instead, he was a follower of the Xiahou clan and one of Xiahou trusted subordinates. He was ranked 7th among his brothers, so he was called 7th uncle. Upon hearing this, 7th uncle said faintly, "That monk cultivates the Great Light Temple's secret technique, the Furious Eyes Vajra Heart Sutra. It seems that he has already cultivated it to the initial realm. He can condense the Vajra form to subdue demons and slay evil. It's not strange for him to be able to resist a 6th transformation precious weapon with his physical body." However, even though he had cultivated his physical body to this level, he couldn't train his internal organs to the point where they were impervious to swords and spears. There were many ways to kill him. As for me, Wu Jiang, you underestimate your 7th uncle too much. No matter what, I have stepped into the realm of oneness of heaven and man for so many years, and I have received your father's guidance. How could I lose to a monk who only has 5 cheese collecting in origin? Not to mention the fact that he has only cultivated the guardian deity form. Even if he had cultivated the wisdom deity form, he would still not be able to withstand my 13 soul-stealing arrows. I will definitely be able to kill him within 7 arrows. Xiahou Wujiang nodded, not feeling that his 7th uncle was bragging. There were a total of 9 retainers by his father's side, all of whom were loyal to Xiahou. They were his father's true confidants, and they were even more reliable than the people in the Xiahou clan. Therefore, these people were all carefully selected. Not a single one of them was simple, and they were not inferior to the martial artists of those big sections. At this moment, Chu Xiu hadn't expected that Ming Chen's physical body would actually be so monstrous because his full-force attack from the heavenly demon dance had actually been blocked by Ming Chen. Just as Chu Xiu was about to withdraw his saber and retreat, Ming Chen turned his fists into palms, put his palms together, and clamped down on Chu Xiu's heavenly demon dance. A scorching Buddhist gang chi followed the heavenly demon dance and blasted directly at Chu Xiu. Moreover, this was not the end. Ming Chen suddenly opened his mouth, and a deafening Buddhist roar came out. It was like a thunderclap, and the others could not help but cover their ears. Great Light Temple's secret technique, 9 transformation lion's roar, Jin formula. As soon as the lion's roar was released, Ming Chen's feet moved, and his body was like a divine dragon swinging its tail. With a powerful gang chi, he kicked at Chu Xiu. The power that erupted at this moment was simply terrifying. From Ming Chen clamping down on Chu Xiu's heavenly demon dance and using his inner strength to counter it, to him using the 9 transformation lion's roar, and finally kicking at Chu Xiu, this series of changes was simply too much for the eyes to take in. It was extremely fast, and it shocked everyone the strength of the Great Light Temple's martial artists. There was no need to mention Chu Xiu's strength. He was ranked 6th on the Longhu leaderboard, and he had the battle record of killing a oneness of heaven and man realm martial artist. He was definitely a famous figure in the underworld. Moreover, this Ming Chen was a nobody. At the very least, no one present had heard of his name. In the end, such a nameless person was able to force Chu Xiu to a dead end in a fight with him. The Great Light Temple's ability could be seen clearly. Of course, everyone present thought that Ming Chen had forced Chu Xiu to a dead end, but Chu Xiu did not think so. Ming Chen lived up to his name as the martial monk instructor of the Great Light Temple. He had a wealth of battle experience, and every martial art technique he used could be said to be extremely proficient. Even when Chu Xiu used the heaven's sun gazing at air to observe, he could not see any flaws. Of course, Chu Xiu's sun gazing at air was only at the entry level. If he could cultivate it to a small success level, he might be able to see more things, and even predict his opponent's attack trajectory. However, he could not find any flaws at the moment. However, this was not important. Chu Xiu had never been someone who relied on expecting his opponent to make a mistake to turn the tables. He wanted to see if it was Ming Chen who had forced him to a dead end, or if it was he who had forced Ming Chen to a dead end. The moment Ming Chen unleashed his series of moves, Chu Xiu also moved. The Buddha light that came from the heavenly demon dance was directly absorbed into Chu Xiu's body, but it was immediately suppressed by his inner lion seal. The glazed gold thread goo in his body shone brightly, melting away the Buddha's vital qi. At the same time, Chu Xiu put away his saber and formed a seal. His hands formed two completely different seals. The fingers on his left hand formed a seal, forming the outer lion seal. In an instant, the sound of thunder exploded, but it was loud enough to be heard. The sonorous and thunderous sound of thunder seemed to be solid as it blasted towards Ming Chen. His right hand formed a fist seal, forming the great Vajra will seal. When the seal fell, it was like a Vajra suppressing a demon. With an unparalleled power, it directly collided with Ming Chen's foot. Seeing this scene, Ming Chen's eyes revealed a look of shock. Chu Xiu's outer lion seal was too similar to the Great Light Temple's 9 transformations lion roar. In fact, if Ming Chen had not cultivated the 9 transformations lion roar, he would have even thought that Chu Xiu had secretly learned the Great Light Temple's cultivation method. It was still unclear which was stronger between the outer lion seal and the 9 transformations lion roar, but Chu Xiu's mental strength was much stronger than Ming Chen's. When the outer lion seal appeared, the powerful power of loud enough to be heard directly suppressed the 9 transformations lion roar's sound waves. It resounded in Ming Chen's ears, causing him to groan. His body slowed down, and the vital qi around him was slightly dispersed by the outer lion seal. At this moment, Chu Xiu's great Vajra will seal collided with Ming Chen's foot. With a loud bang, Ming Chen's figure was directly sent flying by Chu Xiu. Seeing this scene, everyone was stunned. They could not figure out what was going on. Ming Chen was a master of the Great Light Temple, and Chu Xiu's actions were definitely not good. The cruel and ruthless demonic saber should have been the martial arts used by Chu Xiu, but now he was using Buddhist martial arts to fight Buddhist martial arts and sent Ming Chen flying. What was this? No matter how you looked at it, it was ironic. Chu Xiu pressed forward, his hand forming a perfect Aquarius seal. He directly pressed the seal down on Ming Chen, who had not yet landed on the ground. An unparalleled brilliance bloomed, making Chu Xiu look like an eminent monk of the Great Light Temple. Ming Chen roared angrily, and both his hands were like a demon subduing pestle. Vajra demon subduing pestle. There was a violent explosion of gang qi, and Ming Chen was directly smashed into the ground by Chu Xiu. Even his calves were submerged in the ground. Although his arms were still surrounded by the golden Buddhist light, his hands could not help but tremble. It was true that Ming Chen's accumulation was deep, but Chu Xiu's powerful cultivation method of combining Taoism, Buddhism, and demon was even more profound than Ming Chen's. The furious Vajra Heart Sutra had made Ming Chen's body incomparably strong, so strong that he could resist Chu Xiu's demonic dance. However, it didn't mean that his entire body had been trained to be like an Iron Man. The shock to his internal organs caused by the powerful force could still cause him a certain amount of damage. Now Chu Xiu was like this, directly crushing Ming Chen with absolute power. After the perfect Aquarius seal, Chu Xiu formed a complicated seal with both hands. 5 rays of light, like the rotation of the great sun, grew endlessly and crushed toward Ming Chen. Sun will seal. The power of the 5 elements rotated endlessly, and when it came crashing down, even if Ming Chen condensed the Vajra form to resist, the sun will seal still blasted him several feet into the ground. Seeing that Ming Chen had been suppressed, Chu Xiu turned around and blasted out a punch. Boundless killing intent seemed to condense into a substance. Forgetting heaven and forgetting self, destroying heaven and forgetting self-killing fist. Boundless killing intent soared into the sky. Ming Chen also chanted the name of Buddha, and his eyes were wide open, like the angry eyes of a Vajra. His right arm formed the demon subduing seal, and when the seal fell, it collided with Chu Xiu's destroying heaven and forgetting self-killing fist. Suddenly, an earth-shattering sound erupted. The powerful force penetrated through his bones, and Ming Chen's figure retreated step by step. Every step he took caused the ground to crack. At this time, his arm was already twisted, and a stream of blood flowed from his mouth. Looking at Chu Xiu, Ming Chen's eyes showed a touch of regret. He did not regret coming to find trouble with Chu Xiu at this time and fighting to the death with Chu Xiu, but regretted that he did not persist in the past and kill Chu Xiu before he grew to this level. Wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth, Ming Chen chanted the name of Buddha, and traces of blood and qi integrated into the Buddha's light around him. Everyone could see that Ming Chen was ready to fight with his life. It seemed that he was indeed pushed to the extreme by Chu Xiu. If he did not fight with his life, he could only wait for death. However, in the field, Xiahou Wujiang, who was watching the battle, suddenly said coldly, "Seventh uncle, when this monk fights with his life, you also attack. Use the 13 soul-stealing arrows to kill Chu Xiu." Chapter 350. Xiahou Wujiang's words made seventh uncle frown. "Wujiang, sneak attacks aren't nice to talk about. Once I make a move, I'll lose not only my reputation, but also yours. I don't care about my reputation. After all, I'm just a nameless person in Jianghu and I can afford to lose. However, you and Chu Xiu are both elites of the Dragon and Tiger list. You can defeat him head-on or plot against him in secret. However, if you launch a sneak attack from behind, your reputation will plummet. Besides, Chu Xiu has the Guanzhong torture room behind him, and he's now a torturer. I'm afraid it won't be so easy to deal with Guan Siyu if I sneak attack him." Xiahou Wujiang's face showed a hint of killing intent. "Reputation? My reputation has been ruined since Chu Xiu killed Chan Er. What reputation do I need? In the pugilistic world, since ancient times, the winner is the king, and the loser is the thief. Now that I have sneak attacked and killed Chu Xiu, it is indeed damaging my reputation, but after a few years, Chu Xiu will be completely forgotten by the pugilistic world. At that time, who will remember these things? As for the Guanzhong torture room, seventh uncle, don't worry. Father told me last time that our Xiahou family doesn't need to worry about offending the Guanzhong torture room. The key is whether the offense is worth it. Last time I made a move against Chu Xiu, I've already made a death feud with Chu Xiu. He's now a torturer, and no one knows whether he'll become the master of the Guanzhong torture room in the future. Killing Chu Xiu will only offend the Guanzhong torture room now, but keeping Chu Xiu alive will make our Xiahou family always oppose the Guanzhong torture room. Anyway, the result is the same, so it's better to get rid of Chu Xiu now." Previously, Xiahou had said that Xiahou Wujiang was good at everything. His only shortcoming was that he was too arrogant and conceited, looking down on everything. Last time, Xiahou Wujiang had suffered a big loss at the hands of Chu Xiu and was locked up in the ancestral hall by Xiahou to reflect. Xiahou Wujiang still remembered this lesson, and his character changed a lot. He killed when he needed to, and his character became much more decisive. Seventh uncle thought about it and finally nodded. He was a right-hand man of the Xiahou clan, but he was only loyal to Xiahou. This time, Xiahou sent him to protect Xiahou Wujiang with the intention of supervising him. If Xiahou Wujiang went too far, he naturally didn't have to obey his orders. On the contrary, he had to restrain him. But now, what Xiahou Wujiang said was reasonable and well-grounded, and he had even thought through the benefits and consequences of killing Chu Xiu, so he had no reason to refuse. Seventh uncle took out a strange box from the bag on his back. The box was not too big, only the length of an arm. As seventh uncle pressed back and forth on the box a few times, the strange box's mechanism changed and stretched back and forth. In the blink of an eye, the iron box turned into a huge bow half the size of a person. It was completely cast from steel and exuded a strange metallic beauty. This bow only had 13 arrows, which were the strongest 13 arrows condensed from seventh uncle's lifetime cultivation. He could only shoot 13 arrows when he was in the innate realm, and when he reached the unity of heaven and man realm, he could still only shoot 13 arrows. These 13 arrows were soul-stealing and soul-chasing. If he couldn't kill others, others would want to kill him. It was a rather extreme martial art. At this time, seventh uncle was holding the bow, but he didn't make a move. He had even decided to kill Chu Xiu, but he didn't reveal even a trace of killing intent. The soul-chasing and soul-stealing arrow could only be felt at the moment it was shot. At this time, in the field, Ming Chen had already begun to burn his qi and blood to fight for his life. Although the Heart Sutra of the Furious Vajra was a top body refining technique in the Great Light Temple, its side effects were not ordinary. Previously, when Ming Chen killed Chu Xiu, he was hinting in his heart that he killed Chu Xiu for the sake of ridding the Jianghu of evil, so that his killing intent and hatred wouldn't lead to anger. However, after fighting for so long, Ming Chen still had anger in him. At this time, Ming Chen's rational choice would have been to escape immediately after feeling that he was no match for Chu Xiu. The Great Light Temple had many secret techniques and trump cards. If Ming Chen wanted to escape, as long as he paid a price, Chu Xiu might not be able to catch up to him. However, Ming Chen's heart was already occupied by anger, and his rationality was gradually swallowed up. He swore that he would not rest until he killed Chu Xiu. The scarlet blood qi seeped into the golden gang qi around Ming Chen's body, appearing somewhat evil. Ming Chen did not have a saber in his hand, but the blood qi was mixed with the golden gang qi and condensed into a long saber that was almost solid. With one slash, the Vajra avatar turned into the Azura avatar, and the merciful saber turned into the Azura slash. The Vajra's fury had turned into the Azura's fury, and the power of this slash was close to being possessed by demons. Chu Xiu waved his hand, and the heavenly demon dance that had fallen to the ground was once again held in Chu Xiu's hand. A powerful demonic aura swept over, and Chu Xiu's entire body was already shrouded by endless demonic aura and murderous intent. As he slashed with his saber, everyone seemed to have seen 3 layers of changes. In reality, they were not wrong. Chu Xiu had already comprehended the 3 blades of Avicii to the extreme, and this slash contained the power of the 3 blades. It was as if the gates of hell had opened, and a ghostly god was slashing down with a saber. It was extremely terrifying. At this moment, 7th uncle, who was standing in the distance, moved. His strange giant bow and arrow seemed to have completed the series of actions of raising the bow, loading the arrow, and pulling the bowstring in an instant. To outsiders, it was like a series of afterimages. An ordinary unity of heaven and man realm martial artists' gang chi was already strong enough. When they attacked, their gang chi danced, and their aura was extraordinary. However, 7th uncle was different. The aura around his body was restrained to the extreme, and not even the slightest bit of gang chi was emitted. All the power and killing intent in his body were condensed in that arrow, causing the arrow to faintly emit a dark divine glow. The moment 7th uncle aimed the arrow at Chu Xiu felt his entire body turn cold, as if he had been targeted by something. At this moment, he was still in the state of the selfless killer realm, so he was abnormally sensitive to the surrounding killing intent. Almost instantly, he understood what was going on. At the same time, Chu Xiu displayed the heaven's sun gazing at air. In his eyes, all the power around 7th uncle's body was condensed in a single point on that arrow. Outsiders could not see it, but under the state of the heaven's sun gazing at air, the power condensed on the arrow was simply terrifying. This 7th uncle was absolutely one of the top unity of heaven and man realm martial artists that Chu Xiu had encountered. He was even stronger than Feng Wuling in the past. Now that Chu Xiu had drawn his saber, and Ming Chen's Azura slash was already nearing him, Chu Xiu could choose to continue attacking. However, the result would be that he would have to face the sneak attack of 7th uncle's arrow. Even Chu Xiu wasn't sure if he could block Ming Chen's Azura slash or if he could also block 7th uncle's arrow. But now, if Chu Xiu withdrew his saber and retreated, then he would inevitably suffer a certain degree of backlash. He would also attract a pincer attack from 2 people, and he would no longer be able to maintain his peak state. If that happened, then Chu Xiu would have already lost half the battle for Skysplit Tower. At this moment, 7th uncle's soul-stealing 13 arrows had already been shot. The arrow made a thunderous explosion as it left the bowstring. It had already flown for some time when a sonic boom suddenly rang out. The arrow was wrapped in a layer of black aura, and its speed was extremely fast. It chased after Chu Xiu's soul, not giving Chu Xiu any time to think. At this time, Chu Xiu didn't have time to think. He didn't want to put himself in danger, so he could only temporarily let go of the things in Skysplit Tower. However, just as Chu Xiu was about to withdraw his saber and retreat, a clear voice suddenly rang out. "Brother Chu, I've come to help you." As the voice fell, a figure dressed in white leaped up from the foot of the mountain. The halberd in his hand slashed down, and a crimson aura stained the halberd. It was like a blood moon in the sky, and it collided with Seventh Uncle's soul-stealing arrow, causing a loud explosion. The figure dressed in white was forced back 3 steps, but Seventh Uncle's arrow also exploded under this powerful halberd strike. Little Marquis went Lu Fengxian. The person who had suddenly appeared was Lu Fengxian, who had been roaming around West Chu for a long time. At this time, Lu Fengxian had also reached the 5 Qis unification realm, and her strength wasn't inferior to Chu Xiu's. She wasn't much weaker than Seventh Uncle, who was at the unity of the world realm. With Lu Fengxian helping to block Seventh Uncle, Chu Xiu's saber intent, which had just been about to withdraw, became even fiercer as it slashed towards Ming Chen. Under the surging demonic qi, it swallowed the heavens and earth. Even Ming Chen's Azura slash was extinguished by that saber strike. As the saber fell, Ming Chen was sent flying, and a hideous wound appeared on his chest. With his qi and blood injured, the strength of his body also decreased. Just now, he could still use his body to block Chu Xiu's saber strike, but now he was heavily injured by Chu Xiu. Seeing the heavily injured Ming Chen, Chu Xiu's eyes revealed a surging killing intent. Since he had already made his move, there was no need to hesitate. Since he had already heavily injured Ming Chen, how could he hope to bury the hatchet? Taking a step forward, Chu Xiu arrived in front of Ming Chen in an instant. At the same time, his hands formed the Great Vajra will seal, which fell one seal after another. At the beginning, Ming Chen was still able to resist, but in the end, every time Chu Xiu's seal fell, Ming Chen would spit out a mouthful of blood, looking extremely miserable. At this time, the Seventh Uncle raised the giant bow in his hand again, but at this time, 2 people came up the mountain one after another. It was actually Mo Tianlin and Xia Xiaolu. The 2 of them also stood beside Lu Fengxian, staring at the Seventh Uncle like a tiger watching its prey. This caused the Seventh Uncle to hesitate for a moment, but in the end, he still put down the giant bow in his hand. Lu Fengxian's previous attack had already surprised the Seventh Uncle, but she was actually able to receive his arrow without any effort. As for Xia Xiaolu and Mo Tianlin, he was acquainted with them. Both of their backgrounds were not low. If he were to injure them, things would become complicated. At this time, in the battlefield, without the Seventh Uncle's interference, Chu Xiu's eyes revealed a horrifying killing intent. Looking at Ming Chen, whose aura had already reached the extreme, Chu Xiu's fist fell, and his killing intent condensed. Heaven extinguishing, earth annihilating, oblivion killing fist. The scarlet fist intent seemed to condense into a solid substance, and it landed on Ming Chen's chest, immediately causing his chest to cave in, making a muffled sound. Ming Chen's eyes showed a hint of unwillingness, and a large amount of blood flowed from his mouth, but his body had already fallen to the ground. Although Chu Xiu's punch had not been able to destroy his physical body, it had already shattered his heart and internal organs. Chapter 351. After Chu Xiu killed Ming Chen with a single punch, the crowd immediately fell into a state of silence. Everyone was a little dumbfounded. The series of changes made it difficult for them to react. They were already shocked when their Seventh Uncle launched a sneak attack. They did not expect the Xiahou clan, one of the 9 great families, to do something like a sneak attack. Moreover, it was their Seventh Uncle, a warrior at the unity of heaven and man realm, who ambushed a junior like Chu Xiu. However, before they could recover from their shock, another young powerhouse appeared. He blocked their Seventh Uncle's arrow with the strength of the 5 Qis origin realm. His strength was also incomparably strong. Of course, what shocked them the most was Chu Xiu's decisiveness and ruthlessness. That was the martial monk instructor of the Great Light Temple. Although he was not famous in the Jianghu, he was still considered an elite disciple of the Great Light Temple. However, Chu Xiu killed him without any hesitation. It was really not an ordinary kind of decisiveness. Chu Xiu turned his head and cupped his hands at Lu Fengxian. He smiled and said, "Brother Lu, long time no see." Lu Fengxian also revealed a hint of a smile at the corner of her mouth. She said, "Brother Chu, since we parted ways in the northern Yan, your life has been very interesting. Although we haven't seen each other for a long time, the Jianghu is full of legends about you." Chu Xiu then greeted Xia Xiaolu and Mo Tianlin and asked, "You two also heard the news and came here?" Xia Xiaolu took out the 9 dragon coins that represented the 9-branch hall and casually played with them as if he did not care. He said, "After I returned to West Chu, I happened to meet Brother Lu, so I brought him to find Mo Tianlin. He had just stepped into the 3-flower realm and was also released by the Mo family. It was rare for us to meet together, so I was prepared to come to the Guangzhong torture room to find you. I didn't expect to encounter such a thing." Seeing Xia Xiaolu's actions, Chu Xiu also understood. Xia Xiaolu must have met Lu Fengxian and casually pulled him into the 9-branch hall. Lu Fengxian's strength was definitely not inferior to the top 10 on the Longhu leaderboard. Most importantly, he was a lone cultivator with no background. He was definitely the most suitable person to be pulled into the 9-branch hall. Even if Xia Xiaolu did not pull Lu Fengxian into the 9-branch hall in the end, Chu Xiu would find a chance to contact Lu Fengxian. And now, Xia Xiaolu and the others only saw Lu Fengxian's strength, but Chu Xiu knew how terrifying the potential of this young man who looked like a spring breeze was. He was definitely one of the great figures who could dominate the underworld in the future. After exchanging a few pleasantries with everyone, Chu Xiu looked at Xiahou Wujiang and sneered. "I said that if you want to make a move, I'll play with you to the end openly. But now, you're playing those underhanded tricks. How vexing." Xiahou Wujiang frowned, and his expression was a little ugly. Hearing Chu Xiu's sarcasm, he only snorted coldly and did not say anything. Just now, 7th Uncle had already sent a message to Xiahou Wujiang, telling him to calm down. Just by himself, he did not have the confidence to deal with Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian working together. Just now, 7th Uncle had confidently said that he could kill Ming Chen in 7 arrows. But to kill Chu Xiu, even if he shot all 13 arrows, he did not have the confidence. At most, he could only seriously injure Chu Xiu and force him to retreat. And there was also Lu Fengxian, whose strength he did not know, but who had just blocked him. These two were the top of the 5 energies toward the source. 7th Uncle did not have the confidence to deal with the two of them working together. And there was also Xia Xiaolu, Mo Tianlin, and Chu Xiu's subordinates. If they really fought, both sides would be injured. That Teacherson of the Ba Mountain Sword sect was an old fox. Just now, they had fought so fiercely, but Teacherson had not acted. Clearly, he was the one preparing to take advantage in the end. Seeing Xiahou Wujiang's attitude, Chu Xiu frowned. It seemed that Xiahou Wujiang had changed a lot in this period of time. A proud and conceited Xiahou Wujiang was actually not scary. Just like Xiahou Wujiang's appearance at the God Weapon Conference, Chu Xiu had only treated the other party as a clown. At most, he was a clown with a strong background and strength. But now, Xiahou Wujiang was able to let go of his so-called face and decisively let 7th Uncle sneak attack him when it was time to act. Even after he failed and was ridiculed by him, he didn't fly into a rage out of humiliation. Such a Xiahou Wujiang was dozens of times more terrifying than the previous arrogant man who only had talent. But since Xiahou Wujiang did not speak, Chu Xiu's side naturally would not take the initiative to act. Although 7th Uncle had only shot 1 arrow, it was enough to prove his strength. In a head-on fight in public, Chu Xiu did not have the confidence to win. That was why everyone fell into a strange silence during the battle just now. Chu Xiu and the others still occupied the best position near the entrance of the sky-reaching tower. Neither Teacherson nor Xiahou Wujiang stood out to provoke Chu Xiu, let alone the others. Just as everyone was strangely and quietly waiting for the sky-reaching tower to open, Chu Xiu asked Lu Fengxian telepathically, "Brother Lu, did you have many fortuitous encounters in West Chu during this time?" Chu Xiu felt that his cultivation speed was fast enough. In a short 2 years, he had crossed from Xiantian to the 5 Qis origin realm. This kind of speed definitely far surpassed most of the dragon and tiger list martial artists. In the end, Lu Fengxian's speed was not inferior to Chu Xiu's at all, including his accumulation of internal energy. This also made Chu Xiu sigh. Although Lu Fengxian's trajectory had changed under his interference, this great luck had always been with him and had not changed in the slightest. Lu Fengxian smiled and said, "It can't be considered a fortuitous encounter, but there are a lot of good things. Moreover, the World Alliance's Alliance Master Chen is very good to me. I only helped the World Alliance with a few small things, and Alliance Master Chen gave me a lot of things." On the side, Xia Xiaolu bitterly smiled and said, "Brother Lu, my master sincerely invited you to join the World Alliance. If you can become a disciple of the World Alliance, Master will give you even more things. Even if Master makes you the successor of the World Alliance, I will still be convinced." The World Alliance's Chen Qingdi was very fond of Lu Fengxian. This was something that Xia Xiaolu had told Chu Xiu before. It was a pity that Lu Fengxian had rejected Chen Qingdi's good intentions. Right now, Lu Fengxian still shook his head and said, "I'm a person who is used to being free and undisciplined. I can't be controlled by a sect or an aristocratic family. I can only disappoint Alliance Master Chen's good intentions. However, if you need my help, don't hesitate to ask. Brother Chu's 9-branch hall is very good. If you need anything, just ask. As long as I, Lu Fengxian, can help, I will absolutely not refuse." Lu Fengxian's personality was like this. People in the Jianghu only sought fame and fortune, but Lu Fengxian wanted to be free and unfettered. In his heart, there was no good or evil, only what he believed to be right and wrong. If he believed that a person deserved to be killed, even if that person was recognized as a chivalrous person in the Jianghu, or a virtuous Buddhist grandmaster, he would still dare to kill them. And if he believed that you were a friend, even if Chu Xiu became the public enemy of the Jianghu in the future and was spurned by thousands of people, Lu Fengxian would still treat him as a friend. Everything was idealistic. This was easy to say, but it was not easy to do. Perhaps it was because of this state of mind that Lu Fengxian's cultivation speed was so fast that even Chu Xiu was amazed. Chu Xiu turned around and chatted with Xia Xiaolu and Mo Tianlin for a while. The experiences of these two during this time were very simple. Xia Xiaolu's strength was about to break through to the Three-Flower Realm. After the God Weapon Conference, he took a big trip around Eastern Qi and successfully broke through to the Three-Flower Realm. Although Mo Tianlin was grounded by the Mo family after the God Weapon Conference, he did not embarrass the Mo family. Therefore, he was rewarded with a lot of cultivation resources and successfully broke through to the Three-Flower Realm. However, as soon as they broke through to the Three-Flower Realm, they heard the news that Chu Xiu had killed a great master in the unity of the world realm. While they were shocked and defeated, they also secretly thought that they did not make friends this time. With Chu Xiu's strength and potential, they could help Chu Xiu now, but in the future, they would probably have to rely on Chu Xiu to help them. Chu Xiu asked, "By the way, how is Luo Feiheng doing recently?" Mo Tianlin chuckled and said, "Brother Chu, you care so much about Feiheng. Are you interested in her?" Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "Don't mess around. No matter what, she is still a member of our organization. I was just asking casually." Mo Tianlin also casually teased him. In his opinion, although Luo Feiheng was quite beautiful, her personality was not something that ordinary people could handle. She was not suitable to be a wife at all. Only a guy with a screw loose like Xiahou Wujiang would pursue Luo Feiheng relentlessly and even vent his anger on him. That crazy woman, Luo Feiheng, is living a good life. I heard that as soon as she returned to the Luo family, she was reprimanded by the Luo family elders for being enemies with Xiahou Wujiang. You know that crazy woman's personality well. She is not the type to swallow her anger. The next day, she went to the children of the elders one by one. She said that she wanted to learn from them, but in fact, she was ravaging them. She beat them up one by one. She was so ruthless that she almost crippled them. After that, the elders were angry and naturally called her over to reprimand her. They punished her with cultivation resources and made her face the wall. They couldn't really do anything to Luo Feiheng. In the end, after Luo Feiheng finished facing the wall, she beat them up one by one. She even threatened that if the elders reprimanded her, she would beat them up again. She directly beat the disciples and elders of the Luo family until they didn't dare to reprimand her. They even gave her a lot of cultivation resources. Apart from not being able to leave the Luo family for the time being, she is living a better life than anyone else. After listening to Mo Tianlin's narration, Chu Xiu was also stunned. No wonder Mo Tianlin called Luo Feiheng a crazy woman. This kind of behavior was really crazy. If the old scolded me, I would beat the young one. Anyway, we are all from the same family. These people can't really cripple Luo Feiheng. Perhaps only a woman like Luo Feiheng could do such a thing. Chapter 352. Mount Diang temporarily fell into a short period of peace. The ruins of the Tong Tian Tower were also slowly expanding outwards. It was estimated that in another day or two, the door to the first floor would be completely opened. During this time, many people came. There were rogue cultivators and warriors from small forces. However, none of them dared to challenge Chu Xiu. The newcomers were not idiots. They would naturally inquire about what had happened during this period of time. Chu Xiu was a madman who dared to kill people from the Great Light Temple. They did not dare to provoke Chu Xiu at this time. Moreover, Chu Xiu's strength was not weak. Although Chu Xiu was not at the unity of heaven and man realm, together with Lu Fengxian, he was fully qualified to fight against Teacher Tsun and Xiahou Wujiang's seventh uncle. Together with Xie Shaolu and Mo Tianlin, their strength was also very terrifying. Apart from these small characters, there were no important figures during this time. However, on the last day when the Tong Tian Tower was about to emerge from the ground, several women came. There were 5 of them. They were all dressed in white, had beautiful looks, and carried thin swords in their hands. Especially the woman in the lead. She had a beautiful appearance and a graceful figure. Every detail of her face seemed to have been sculpted to perfection. She was like a fairy from the heavenly palace. It was a kind of untouchable and inviolable beauty. The moment they saw this woman, almost everyone present was stunned. Even Chu Xiu was the same. There were countless beauties in the Jianghu. Chu Xiu had seen many beauties, but there were only a few who could stand shoulder to shoulder with the woman in front of him. Mei Qinglian was one of them. However, Mei Qinglian's beauty was the kind of cold with a charm. It was as if there was a tempting feeling of ice and fire. It gave people a kind of soul-stealing beauty. On the other hand, Luo Feiheng couldn't even be compared to this woman. What attracted people to Luo Feiheng was the heroic spirit that she exuded, giving people a different feeling. However, in terms of facial features, both Mei Qinglian and Luo Feiheng were inferior to this woman. Facing a beauty of this level, Chu Xiu's eyes only lingered on her face for a few breaths of time before he looked down. Of course, he wasn't looking at some indescribable place, but at their swords. The thin sword was only as wide as a thumb. It didn't look like a long sword, but more like a bamboo pole. Chu Xiu was very familiar with this kind of sword. It had almost taken Chu Xiu's life. This slender sword was the Yu Maiden sword of the Yu Maiden Palace. There was only one such sword in the Jianghu. However, the Yu Maiden Palace was located in Wuyue land, which was quite far from here. How did they get here? Did they also pass by accident? Just as Chu Xiu was deep in thought, the surrounding cultivators seemed to have reacted. Their eyes were filled with admiration and fascination as they discussed and pointed at Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu secretly transmitted his voice to Mo Tianlin. Do you know these martial artists from the Yu Maiden Palace? Mo Tianlin's eyes widened. He looked at Chu Xiu with disbelief and said in surprise, You don't know? One of the 4 great beauties of Wulin, the senior apprentice sister of the Yu Maiden Palace, the famous cloud sword fairy, Yan Fian. You don't know? Chu Xiu asked in reply, do I need to know? Xia Xiaolu said lightly. If Brother Chu was like you who likes to pay attention to these Jianghu gossips every day, he wouldn't be able to cultivate to his current level. Mo Tianlin waved the fan in his hand and snorted coldly. You don't care about these things, and your cultivation isn't much higher than mine. After exchanging a few words with Xia Xiaolu out of habit, Mo Tianlin introduced Yan Fian to Chu Xiu in detail. The so-called 4 great beauties of Jianghu was just a list made up by some busybodies. It couldn't be counted, but it could also indirectly prove Yan Fian's beauty. Of course, Yan Fian didn't rely on her appearance to become famous in Jianghu. This generation of the Yu Maiden Palace's strength in Jianghu wasn't too strong. It was in a period of decline, but Yan Fian outshone the others in the Yu Maiden Palace. Even her fame in Jianghu was very great. Of course, it was because of her strength, not her appearance. Right now, Yan Fian had the strength of the 5 Qis origin realm, and was even ranked 8th on the Dragon Tiger leaderboard. She definitely belonged to the top of Jianghu. But at this time, Mo Tianlin transmitted his voice in a low voice. Brother Chu, although this Yan Fian's looks can be said to be peerless, I also advise you to not have any ideas about her. The disciples of the Yu Maiden Palace only have the sword in their lives. It is absolutely impossible for them to marry a man. The disciples of the Yu Maiden Palace who dared to violate the precepts over the years are very miserable, and the men who are related to them are even more miserable. Moreover, this group of women have become somewhat muddle-headed from practicing the sword. There's no reason to reason with women, and there's even less reason with a group of crazy women who practice the sword. Before Chu Xiu could say anything, Lu Fengxian at the side said in astonishment, matters of love are human nature. What the Yu Maiden Palace is doing is simply destroying human desire. With such actions, are there no loopholes in their hearts? Mo Tianlin teased. What, Brother Lu is somewhat interested in them. Lu Fengxian shook her head and said, no, I'm just a little curious. No matter what, the Yu Maiden Palace is a righteous sect. Doing this is somewhat killing their nature. Mo Tianlin and Lu Fengxian hadn't known each other for too long, and they hadn't fought side by side before. Therefore, he only teased her out of habit and didn't joke too much. Hearing this, Mo Tianlin said, the Yu Maiden sword mantra is a sword bestowed by the heavens. The heavenly Tao is emotionless. If you want to cultivate this sword mantra, how can you have human desire? Therefore, from the beginning, the Yu Maiden Palace didn't allow their disciples to talk about love. It's not an exaggeration to say that they are destroying human desire. When Chu Xiu heard this, he shook his head and thought to himself that it was all bullshit. The heavenly Tao is emotionless, and Taisheng forgets emotions. It was impossible for a human's thought process to be on par with the heavenly Tao. Or it could be said that at that time, if one cast aside the 7 emotions and 6 desires, they would no longer be human. In Chu Xiu's opinion, the Yu Maiden Palace's rule of forbidding love was purely something that the founder of the Yu Maiden Palace of some generation had thought of. In the end, it had continued until now. The reason was very simple. In the past, Feng Wuling had fallen in love with a female disciple of the Yu Maiden Palace, even to the extent that his heart had died. In the end, he managed to cultivate the Yu Maiden sword mantra. Therefore, this thing completely depended on talent. What was the point of talking so much? At this moment, the few female disciples of the Yu Maiden Palace were sizing up the heaven-reaching tower. Yan Fian hugged her thin sword and looked at the heaven-reaching tower without saying a word. One of the female disciples said in surprise, Senior sister, it said that a treasure has appeared here. Is this strange round tower it? Yan Fian nodded and said in a pleasant voice, it should be it. If I'm not wrong, this should be the heaven-reaching tower left behind by the ancient martial arts sect, the heaven-reaching martial sect. It has appeared in the pugilistic world in the past. This heaven-reaching tower is still intact. There should be many good things in it. We've made the right decision to come this time. Junior sister Wan, haven't you been nagging about the lack of spiritual medicine given to you by the sect? This time, you should be able to find some in the heaven-reaching tower, or discover some other good things. Bring them back to the sect to exchange. The female disciple called Wan, nodded and looked around. She asked the itinerant martial artist standing at the side, "Hey, the few of you, do any of you know what happened here? When will this heaven-reaching tower appear?" Wan Er's words were somewhat bossy, as if these itinerant martial artists were her servants. If these words were asked by a man, these itinerant martial artists would most likely feel humiliated and angry. However, although Wan Er's appearance was far from Yan Fian's, she was still a feast for the eyes. The itinerant martial artists who were asked even felt honored. The leader of the Thunder Cloud stronghold, Chen Yun, was the first to step forward. He smiled and cupped his hands. "The heroines of the Yunu Palace have arrived at the right time. This heaven-reaching tower is about to appear." With that, Chen Yun recounted everything that happened when Tong Tian Pagoda appeared to the people of the Yunu Palace like beans pouring out of a bamboo tube. However, when Chu Xiu was mentioned, the people of the Yunu Palace all looked at Chu Xiu. They frowned and actually walked towards Chu Xiu. Everyone present was stunned. What were the people of the Yunu Palace trying to do? Were they going to challenge Chu Xiu, or were they trying to use their advantage to stand on the same level as Chu Xiu? When Mo Tianlin saw this scene, he teased Chu Xiu, "Brother Chu, I'm afraid your luck with the ladies is about to arrive." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Luck with the ladies? I'm afraid it's a calamity with the ladies." Apart from Yan Fian, the people of the Yunu Palace were all aggressive. From the looks of it, it didn't seem like something good was about to happen. As expected, when they got close, the woman called Wan lifted her chin and asked, "You are Chu Xiu?" Chu Xiu frowned and nodded, feeling a little uncomfortable. This woman's tone was very problematic. Even if Chu Xiu was an ordinary pugilistic world person, this woman's tone was a little impolite, let alone the fact that Chu Xiu was in the top 6 of the Longhu list. Didn't she even know how to cup her hands and greet him? However, Chu Xiu couldn't be bothered to lower himself to a woman's level. He only said indifferently, "I am." "What about it? You killed Feng Wuling?" Wan asked. Chu Xiu nodded. At the side, Mo Tianlin was still making faces at Chu Xiu. He also knew about Feng Wuling's matter. Chu Xiu had helped the people of the Yunu Palace to kill the person they had always wanted to kill. From the looks of it, the people of the Yunu Palace wanted to thank Chu Xiu. However, what Wan said next made everyone present dumbfounded. Wan used the hilt of her sword to point at Chu Xiu and snorted coldly, "It's fine that you killed Feng Wuling. The Yunu Palace was originally prepared to kill him, but you should never have broken the Yunu sword of the Yunu Palace. The Yunu sword of the Yunu Palace was bestowed by the ancestral master. Breaking the sword is an insult to the Yunu Palace. You have to give the Yunu Palace an explanation for this matter." As soon as she said this, everyone present was dumbfounded. No one expected the people of the Yunu Palace to say such a thing. The teasing words that Mo Tianlin was about to say were directly held back by him. He had long heard that the women of the Yunu Palace were somewhat unreasonable, but he never thought that they would be unreasonable to such an extent. They were simply making trouble for no reason. Chapter 353. Previously, when the people from the Yunu Palace mentioned Feng Wuling, everyone present thought that the people from the Yunu Palace wanted to thank Chu Xiu for helping them kill this fellow who had shamed the Yunu Palace. However, who would have thought that the people from the Yunu Palace would actually say such unreasonable words? For a swordsman, their own sword was indeed very important, especially for a sect like the Yunu Palace, which had a long history of swords. It was normal for them to value their own sword. However, the problem was that if the sword Chu Xiu broke was in the hands of a warrior from the Yunu Palace, the other party could still demand an explanation. However, the sword that Chu Xiu broke was with Feng Wuling. Would Chu Xiu still have to worry about the Yunu Palace's sword and be careful not to hurt it at such a critical moment? Chu Xiu immediately sneered and said, "I don't like to reason with people, and I don't want to reason with women like you who don't know what's going on. You don't have the ability to kill Feng Wuling, so I killed him for you. It's fine if you don't thank me, but you still want to demand an explanation from me?" This is simply the biggest joke in the world. Hearing what Chu Xiu said, Wan Er's face immediately revealed a hint of anger. She was just about to say something when she saw Chu Xiu say expressionlessly, I rarely attack women, but the condition is that you don't provoke me. It seems like it's not your first day in the underworld. You should know some rules. It's very impolite for a person holding a sword to point the hilt at someone else. Since your master didn't teach you these underworld etiquettes and hierarchy, I'll teach you. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu took a step forward and reached out to grab Wan Er. No one present had expected Chu Xiu to attack without any warning. Furthermore, his target was the women from the Yunu Palace. They were all stunned and only reacted after a while. Wan Er's strength was not strong. She was only in the inner gang realm. She did not react until Chu Xiu made his move. Yan Fian's expression suddenly changed. The Yu Maiden sword, which was glowing with a faint blue light, suddenly appeared in her hand. She stabbed out with the sword, like a wisp of smoke. The seemingly simple sword force had already arrived in front of Chu Xiu in the blink of an eye. Chu Xiu's figure moved, and his hand formed the wisdom fist seal without a change in expression. In an instant, the area within a radius of 100 feet became his gang chi domain. Because the distance between the two sides was too close, under Chu Xiu's wisdom fist seal, all of the Yunu Palace disciples were enveloped within the range of the wisdom fist seal's aura domain. Apart from Yan Fian who could still move, everyone else was confined. Under the wisdom fist seal, one could easily defeat a country. For an ancient martial art practitioner like Chu Xiu who was good at close combat, it was simply a nightmare to let him get close to her. Even though Yan Fian's strength was not weak, she could not do anything to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu's left hand grabbed towards Wan Er, and his right hand formed the great Vajra will seal to block the sword, pushing it away. However, Yan Fian's sword force suddenly changed, and a strange dim light bloomed on the tip of the sword. It was as if it could pierce through the heaven and earth, and it stabbed towards Chu Xiu. The Yu Maiden Sword Codex's sword technique was naturally formed. Yan Fian's understanding of the Yu Maiden Sword Codex was not inferior to Feng Wuling. This sword already carried some of the might of heaven and earth, and it was not brought about by her realm, but by her cultivation in the Yu Maiden Sword Codex. However, at such a close range, Yan Fian's sword technique had no room to be used at all. Chu Xiu held his saber in a reverse grip, and slashed out with a torrential demonic aura, once again blocking Yan Fian's sword. At this moment, his left hand was already about to grab Wan Er. Wan screamed and instinctively stabbed out with the Yu Maiden sword in her hand. However, a trace of golden light bloomed in Chu Xiu's hand. It was still the Great Vajra will seal. However, this time, Chu Xiu's Great Vajra will seal did not directly strike down. Instead, he grabbed the Yu Maiden sword in Wan Er's hand and crushed it. Although the Yu Maiden sword of the Yu Maiden Palace was the same, there was a huge difference. The Yu Maiden sword in everyone's hands was of a different level, and the effects were also different. For example, the Yu Maiden sword in Wan Er's hand was only a fourth transformation elementary precious weapon. Of course, it could not stop Chu Xiu's Great Vajra will seal. Retreating, Chu Xiu said indifferently, previously, you said that crushing Feng Wuling's Yu Maiden sword was an insult to your Yu Maiden Palace? Then you are wrong. Right now, I am the one who is insulting your Yu Maiden Palace. The few female disciples of the Yu Maiden Palace had darkened expressions. Wan Er, who had her sword crushed by Chu Xiu, was so angry that her eyes turned red. The only one who could still maintain her composure was Yan Fian. She frowned and said, Official Chu, Wan did use some inappropriate words just now, but you didn't have to be so ruthless and crush her sword, right? You are an expert ranked 6th on the Dragon and Tiger leaderboard. Wan Er is just a little girl who has just stepped into the pugilistic world and doesn't know the rules. Aren't you afraid of being ridiculed by the people of the pugilistic world for bullying her like this? Chu Xiu squinted his eyes and looked at Yan Fian. Of course, his gaze was not lecherous. Instead, it was sizing her up. This woman was not a simple character. That Wan didn't know the rules of the pugilistic world. How could she, a young elite ranked in the top 10 of the Dragon and Tiger leaderboard, not know? In the end, she did not stop Wan, just now. But now, she spoke of Chu Xiu as if he was a shameless person who bullied a weak woman. Xiahou Wujiang laughed coldly from behind and said, "Miss Yen, you are wrong. This Chu Xiu is not someone who has tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex. He has already been scolded by the people of the pugilistic world countless times, but he still has the nerve to continue mingling in the pugilistic world. He is not worried about his reputation." Chu Xiu cast a glance at Xiahou Wujiang and said coldly, "Xiahou Wujiang, this has nothing to do with you. If you are not convinced, and want to fight before the Tower of Babel opens, I will also accompany you to the end." Seeing Xiahou Wujiang laugh coldly and not say anything, Chu Xiu turned his gaze to Yan Fian and said expressionlessly, "I am not used to reasoning with people, and I am even less used to reasoning with women. I did not want to provoke the Yu Palace, but if you insist on finding trouble with me because of some inexplicable matter, then fine, I will also accept it." What Chu Xiu said was the truth. Although his ability to cause trouble was a little strong, the premise was that he would be able to obtain benefits after causing trouble. He had no enmity with this group of women from the Yu Palace, but they came to find trouble with him because of some inexplicable reason. Fine, then, Chu Xiu could only accept it. Under normal circumstances, Chu Xiu would not hit women, but the premise was that they did not provoke him too much. Lu Fengxian stood up, cupped her hands, and said in a deep voice, "Miss, what you said is a little too much. Last time when Brother Chu fought with that Feng Wulong, he was at the three-flower realm of acupoint against unity of heaven and man. Every step was filled with killing intent. Not to mention the broken sword, Brother Chu was lucky to be able to survive. Why would he care about the sword?" Yan Fian glanced at Lu Fengxian but did not say anything. She did not know Lu Fengxian. Previously, when Xinyun mentioned Lu Fengxian, he only said that he was Chu Xiu's reinforcements. He did not go into detail about how Lu Fengxian cut down the seventh uncle's arrow with a halberd. Therefore, Yan Fian subconsciously thought that Lu Fengxian was just a nobody. At this time, Mo Tianlin also stood up and said, "Miss Yan, the stubborn rules of the Yu Palace need to be changed. If the sword was in the hands of the people from the Yu Palace, it would indeed be an insult to the Yu Palace if Chu Xiu broke it. However, the sword was in the hands of that Feng Wulong. What you are doing is a bit unreasonable." Xia Xiaolu was a man of few words. He just stood beside Mo Tianlin and said indifferently, "You also need to be reasonable in the martial world. Of course, some powers have the right to be unreasonable, but it is clear that the Yu Palace does not have that right now." Mo Tianlin and Xia Xiaolu were backed by the Mo family of Shangyang, one of the 9 great families, and the other by the World Alliance of West Chu. Neither of them were to be trifled with. Their weight was not something that Lu Fengxian could compare with. Yan Fian was silent for a while, then said, "What you said makes sense. However, just now, official Chu broke one sword in front of so many people. The Yu Palace will remember this matter. If there is a chance in the future, we will definitely find official Chu for advice." After saying that, Yan Fian retreated with her people. Wan shouted unwillingly, "Senior sister." Yan Fian frowned and said, "Wan, don't mess around." Among these Yu Palace disciples, Yan Fian's prestige was still very high. Once she spoke, even if Wan was unwilling, she could only pout and leave. After they left, Chu Xiu frowned and asked Mo Tianlin, "Why are the people of the Yu Palace all like this? Do these women really think they are the leaders of the 5 great sword sects?" Mo Tianlin smiled bitterly and said, "Just now I said that these women are a bit confused from practicing the sword. Looking at them now, they have become even worse. But Brother Chu, this is only because of you. If it was anyone else, they would not have fought. After all, the Yu Palace used to be glorious in the past. All the sects in the martial world will give them face. The most important thing is that the Yu Palace is filled with beautiful women. Facing beautiful women, everyone has to be patient and give them preferential treatment. If your attitude just now was not so unyielding and patiently explained to the other party, with us helping you, this matter would probably be over. But now, you broke another sword of the Yu Palace in front of everyone. I'm afraid this matter will not end so well. Chu Xiu smiled and asked, do I look like I have a good temper and patience? Mo Tianlin thought about it and shook his head. This was also the fault of the Yu Palace for courting death. Chu Xiu's attitude was unyielding and his murderous nature was rare in this world. Just based on Wan Er's attitude just now, Chu Xiu only crushed her sword and did not cripple her. This was already being merciful and protective of the fairer sex. Among the four of them, probably only Mo Tianlin and Lu Fengxian could patiently explain this matter. Mo Tianlin's attitude towards women had always been good, and Lu Fengxian's character was also good. If it was Xie Xiaolu, he would probably have directly slashed with his sword. Mo Tianlin said, but it's fine to offend them. The Yu Palace's current strength is not too strong. Among the 5 great sword sects, the Yu Palace can only be ranked at the bottom. Last time Madame Xiahou shielded Feng Wuling, the Yu Palace came to demand an explanation. In the end, they did not get anything and were easily deceived by Madame Xiahou. Chapter 354. Chu Xiu didn't take the people from the Yu Palace seriously. They were just a declining sect. The pugilistic world was somewhat unfair to women, but at the same time, it also gave them preferential treatment. Other than Chu Xiu, who did not have tender feelings for the fairer sex and would fall out with her at the drop of a hat, most people would not choose to be so ruthless. But at the same time, most people in the Jianghu were very rational. Everyone was concerned about benefits and strength, which had nothing to do with gender. There was only one flaw in a sect where women were the leaders, and that was that they were easily swayed by emotions. They were too emotional and not rational, so this caused a lot of unnecessary trouble. The Yu Palace's aggressive action of finding trouble with the Xiahou clan was a good example. As one of the top 9 aristocratic families, the Xiahou clan's strength was several times or even more than 10 times that of the Yu Palace. With the Yu Palace's current strength, they would be asking for humiliation if they aggressively asked for an explanation from the Xiahou clan. They wouldn't get anything. In the end, that was indeed the case. The people from the Yu Palace were deceived by the Xiahou clan with just a few words. They returned empty-handed and lost their reputation for no reason. If it were any other faction, they would have dealt with this situation in a low-profile manner. They had to make a big fuss, and in the end, they lost face. Chu Xiu was now backed by the Guanzhong torture room. Although Guan Siyu, the hall master, hadn't fought in the Jianghu for a long time, her strength wasn't just for show. Moreover, the Guanzhong torture room's strength wasn't limited to what it showed on the surface. The true elite combat power of the Guanzhong torture room was in the criminal division. These people knew nothing about tracing traces and investigating cases. They were only good at killing. All these years, the Guanzhong torture room had been able to survive in the cracks. It wasn't enough to rely on Guan Siyu alone. More importantly, the Guanzhong torture room had the strength that wasn't inferior to the top sections. At this moment, the white light emitted by the Tower of Babel became denser and denser. It was almost about to open. Chu Xiu whispered to Mo Tianlin and the others, "Be careful after we enter the Tong Tian Tower. There might be something waiting for us inside." Mo Tianlin said in surprise, "Shouldn't we be most careful of Xiahou Wujiang's group later? There are living creatures in Tong Tian Tower?" Chu Xiu said, "That's hard to say. In ancient times, those guys from the Tong Tian martial sect would study anything and dared to study anything. They dared to cultivate the martial arts of the Daoist, Buddhist, and Devil sects at the same time. Moreover, there were all kinds of hidden weapons, formations, alchemy, and the like. In any case, as long as it was something that existed in the Jianghu, they would study it. They even dared to raise some evil and ferocious beasts that they caught from the wild mountains. Some of these things were already extinct, but it was unknown if there were any left in Tong Tian Tower. At present, this Tong Tian Tower itself is an existence that combines the Tao of array and the Tao of refining to the peak. Even if there is no one in it, the formation is still operating automatically, and some living creatures in it can go dormant. Moreover, we are foreign enemies at the moment. For the formation of Tong Tian Tower itself, as long as we enter it, we will be directly judged as intruders. At that time, it is unknown what we will encounter. Chu Xiu didn't know some of the details of the original plot, but it was clear that there were still some dangers in this well-preserved Tong Tian Tower. Now, Chu Xiu also gave them a reminder first. At this moment, the light above Tong Tian Tower bloomed to the extreme. The originally closed door slowly opened. Chu Xiu and the others occupied the best position and directly entered. As soon as Xiahou Wujiang and others saw Chu Xiu's action, they also hurriedly entered. As soon as he stepped into Tong Tian Tower, Chu Xiu felt dizzy, and there was a vast expanse of whiteness in front of him. At this time, he had been shrouded in a thick fog, and he could hardly see anything more than 10 feet away with his naked eye. There was no movement. It seemed that after entering Tong Tian Tower, the formation's random teleportation had been activated, and there should be no one around Chu Xiu. Of course, for warriors, sometimes the naked eye was not so important. The perception of warriors was even more sensitive than the naked eye. But in this Tong Tian Tower, under the suppression of the formation, Chu Xiu's perception was also suppressed, and the range was even less than that of the naked eye, only about 10 feet. Taking out a formation plate, the original white jade-like formation plate had 5 different colored light spots, representing 5 different directions. This was the 5 elements formation that Chu Xiu had buried on Mount Diang before. At this time, in the fog, the naked eye and perception were suppressed to the extreme. It was easy to get lost and go around in circles without a clear direction. Moreover, although this 5 elements array formation was outside of Skysplit Tower, as long as someone was in that position, they would still be able to detect some movement. This would also make it convenient for Chu Xiu to meet up with LV Fengxian and the others. In the fog, Chu Xiu did not know which direction the good things in Tong Tian Tower were, so he kept walking in one direction. Although Tong Tian Tower looked very big from the outside, it was definitely not as spacious as the inside, which was like a small city. The entire interior of Tong Tian Tower had been enveloped by the space formation, so even Chu Xiu did not know how big it was. After walking for about a quarter of an hour, Chu Xiu suddenly stopped and looked at the ground. There was a broken hand on the ground, and a large amount of blood was scattered on the ground. Looking at the edge of the broken hand, Chu Xiu could not help but raise his eyebrows. The broken hand was not cut off, but was bitten off by something. Chu Xiu had been in the Guanzhong torture hall for such a long time. Although he had not studied things like traces and judging cases, he could be said to have been influenced by what he had seen and heard. He could still see these things. It seemed that there were still living things in Tong Tian Tower. He did not know what messy things the Tong Tian martial sect had locked up in Tong Tian Tower in ancient times. At this moment, there was suddenly a fishy wind behind Chu Xiu. It was extremely sudden, and there was not the slightest sign in advance. Chu Xiu turned back to look, and a ferocious beast head full of sharp teeth was less than a foot away from his head, but Chu Xiu did not notice it at all. However, Chu Xiu's eyes did not have the slightest hint of panic. The heavenly demon dance in his hand slashed out a black ray of light, and the beast's head directly fell to the ground. Crimson blood splattered everywhere, and the 3-meter-tall body crashed to the ground. Chu Xiu looked at the corpse on the ground and could not help but frown. He muttered, "What is the Tong Tian martial sect researching? What is this thing?" The giant beast that Chu Xiu had killed did not look like any living creature he knew. Its head looked like a bear, but not a bear. For canine teeth were exposed, and its body was as strong as a lion or tiger. The strangest thing was that this thing had 6 legs, and looked similar to those fierce beasts in the legends. Humans were the spirits of all living creatures. They could sense the heaven and earth, and cultivate martial arts. Legends said that they could even shatter the void and achieve immortality. Wild beasts were also one of the spirits of heaven and earth. Because they mistakenly consumed some kind of elixir, their spiritual wisdom increased greatly, and they were not inferior to humans. They also had all kinds of strange powers, and such existences were called spiritual beasts. It was said that the World Alliance's Qinqing raised a black tiger, which he obtained from the wild mountains of West Chu. It was this kind of legendary spiritual beast, and it was unusually intelligent. Except for the fact that it could not speak, it was almost no different from a human. Moreover, this black tiger's speed was simply astonishing. It was said that there was once a small sect leader in the physical invulnerability realm who spoke disrespectfully to Qinqing. In the end, everyone only saw a black shadow flash by, and that person's head had already disappeared. However, that black tiger did not seem to move, and was still lying lazily at the feet of Qinqing, but it was playing with a human head in its claws. This kind of spiritual beast could only be encountered, and not sought. It was even said that in the ancient times, some martial artists specially developed martial arts suitable for spiritual beasts to increase their strength. If the existence of spiritual beasts was said to be an accident, and their original bodies were just ordinary wild beasts, then the fierce beasts were the terrifying existences left behind from the ancient times. To be able to be called the existence of fierce beasts, they were born with all kinds of powerful and strange powers, and relied on devouring elixirs and powerful martial artists to grow. In the ancient times, there were many such fierce beasts, and in some ancient books, there were many records of ancient martial artists fighting with all kinds of fierce beasts. However, after experiencing the great calamity of the ancient times, these fierce beasts were almost all dead. Although after that calamity, 99% of the sects were buried, and countless martial artists died, the only advantage of the human race being able to survive for so many years was the inheritance of words. Although those sects were destroyed, and the people were gone, their inheritance was left behind in the secret box, and was discovered by later generations. They continued to practice martial arts, and in the end, it became the current golden age of martial arts. As for the fierce beasts, they completely relied on the inheritance of blood. Once they died, there was nothing left, and even reproduction became a problem. Now, the fierce beasts were no longer a big enemy of the human race. Occasionally, people would find some fierce beasts in those remote mountains and forests, and those martial artists would treat them as walking treasures. They would immediately gather a large number of martial artists to kill them, and use their flesh and blood to refine pills, and their scales and bones to refine weapons. Although Chu Xiu had never seen a fierce beast, the thing he killed now had the appearance of a standard fierce beast, but its strength was very weak, and it did not have any strange power. It was killed by Chu Xiu's saber. It was estimated that if a martial artist of the Xiantian realm wanted to kill this thing, it would be easy. The martial artists who were swallowed by this thing were also very unlucky, either they had not reached the Xiantian realm, or because of the thick fog, they were sneak attacked. At this moment, there was a sudden roar of wild beasts in the distance, and there were also some martial artists crying. When Chu Xiu got closer, he saw that it was actually a strange beast with a bird's body and a beast's head. It even had sharp claws and wings, and it was the size of a tiger or leopard, chasing after two martial artists. The strength of these strange beasts was also not strong, but they were densely packed, and it seemed to be endless, making people's scalps tingle. Chapter 355. The two people who were being chased by a group of exotic beasts were lone cultivators. Their strength had just reached the innate realm. These strange exotic beasts were actually very weak. In Chu Xiu's opinion, they were not even comparable to ordinary lions and tigers. However, the problem was that there were too many of them. They were densely packed together, making one's scalp tingle. There was no end to them no matter how many they killed. Only when a martial artist reached the martial Dao Grandmaster realm and condensed the martial Dao true core could they convert the power of heaven and earth into their own strength at will. Only then could they truly be unafraid of taking turns to fight. They could ignore numbers and fight an army of 10,000 alone. Just like when Chu Xiu fought a group of people alone, he actually only killed them until they were terrified. If those martial artists really wanted to kill Chu Xiu, and none of them were afraid of death, Chu Xiu would have died several times over. Humans were afraid of death, but obviously these exotic beasts were not. Even though the two lone cultivators killed as they ran, the exotic beasts seemed to have been starved for tens of thousands of years. They all chased after them with bloodshot eyes. At this moment, the two lone cultivators also saw Chu Xiu. Their eyes suddenly lit up, and they immediately ran in Chu Xiu's direction. When they ran to Chu Xiu, the exotic beasts had also chased after them. The two then shouted, "Official Chu, save us." An elusive smile suddenly appeared on Chu Xiu's face. "Actually, I'm a person who occasionally shows mercy. If you beg me sincerely, I can save you." One of them heard Chu Xiu say that he would save them, and his eyes lit up. However, the other felt that there was something wrong with Chu Xiu's tone and immediately took a step back. At this point, Chu Xiu's face suddenly darkened, and he said coldly, "But what I hate the most is when people play these tricks in front of me. Remember, in your next life, play as many tricks as you have the strength. Playing such tricks in front of people who are much stronger than you is pathetic and ridiculous." As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu directly blasted out with his palm. The powerful palm force directly blasted the two people into the herd of beasts. Even the person who wanted to retreat before was not spared. A terrifying chewing sound suddenly came from the herd of beasts. Almost in the blink of an eye, the two innate realm experts were directly bitten into a cloud of blood mist. The expression on Chu Xiu's face did not change at all. These two people were courting death. They really thought that Chu Xiu could not see through their little tricks. They actually led the beast herd to his side before asking for help. Obviously, they planned to let an expert like Chu Xiu help them resist. Actually, even if they didn't do this, Chu Xiu would also investigate in the direction of the beast herd to see what was going on and why there were so many beasts there. It would be fine if he could save them while he was at it. At this moment, after the countless beasts swallowed the two innate realm experts, the ferocious aura became thicker, and they all surged towards Chu Xiu. It wasn't too difficult to deal with a beast herd of this level. As long as one stepped into the physical invulnerability realm, a martial artist who could externalize their aura would be able to cause great damage to them. Chu Xiu formed the outer lion's seal with his hand. As his fingers tapped on the seal, a loud sound rang out, but it was like a thunderclap. Within a radius of several zhang, all the exotic beasts bled from their 7 orifices and died on the spot. In the past, Chu Xiu's opponents were too strong. Hence, the outer lion seal was used by Chu Xiu as a support-type martial technique, disrupting his opponents at crucial moments. However, to these powerless exotic beasts, it didn't take much effort to kill them. As Chu Xiu walked over, the ground was practically covered with the corpses of those exotic beasts. They were densely packed together, creating a spectacular sight. At this moment, the silhouette of a palace finally appeared in front of him. There seemed to be quite a few people standing there. When the exotic beasts behind Chu Xiu saw the palace, they seemed to feel a sense of fear towards it. Even when Chu Xiu slaughtered them along the way, they didn't feel any fear. However, when they saw the palace, they immediately hid their claws and teeth and left with their tails between their legs. At this moment, the martial artists in front of the palace were also dumbfounded when they saw Chu Xiu. Seeing Chu Xiu's arrival, they naturally saw the corpses on the ground behind Chu Xiu. In fact, most of them had been chased here by the exotic beasts. It was just that they had a hard time escaping. How could they be as relaxed as Chu Xiu? They even suspected that if Chu Xiu was allowed to continue killing like this, would Chu Xiu kill all of these things? At this moment, there was someone familiar to Chu Xiu among the group. More accurately, it should be an enemy. It was Teachertsen of the Ba Mountain Sword Sect. Seeing Chu Xiu's arrival, Teachertsen also snorted coldly. With Teachertsen's cultivation at the unity of heaven and man realm, it didn't take much effort for him to kill these exotic beasts. However, he had to use sword techniques to kill his way here. It wasn't as easy as Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu glanced at the palace in front of him. The main structure was still constructed from materials similar to Yubayu. However, the entrance was a heavy bronze door. Previously, several martial artists had tried to open it, but none of them had been able to do so. Even when Teacherson had tried, he had only managed to shake the door slightly and not completely open it. Everyone looked at Chu Xiu and Teacher Cien. If the two of them worked together, they should be able to completely open the door. However, there was a great enmity between the two of them. Chu Xiu had killed Teacherson's disciple. Could the two of them work together? At this time, a middle-aged martial artist in his 40s with a simple and honest demeanor stepped forward and said with a smile, "Lord Chu, Elderson, the two of you are the strongest here, so it will be up to you to open this door. There are countless treasures in the sky-reaching tower. It is easy to resolve grudges. However, this treasure will only appear once. How about resolving grudges in the future?" Chu Xiu sized up the bronze door and said indifferently, "Sure. Anyway, someone is looking for me for revenge. It's not like I'm the one looking for revenge." Teacherson also thought about it. In the end, he nodded with a slightly ugly expression. Seeing that the two of them had agreed, everyone retreated to the side. Chu Xiu shrugged and didn't say anything else. He formed the Great Vajra will seal and mobilized all the vital energy in his body. In an instant, the light of Buddha shone brightly in his hand as he attacked the bronze door. Teacherson didn't do anything. The long sword in his hand instantly became incomparably heavy. It was as magnificent as the mountains and rivers. Once the sword aura appeared, it directly condensed into a thick sword aura that was more than 10 feet long. With a boom, it also slashed at the bronze door. This was one of the sword techniques of the Ba Mountain Sword Sect, the Splendid Mountain and River Sword. The sword techniques of the Ba Mountain Sword Sect were actually not very famous. The Night Rain of Ba Mountain and the Purple Lightning Thunderbolt evolved into 8 sword techniques. Although none of them were too weak, they were also not too strong. In terms of pure strength, the Splendid Mountain and River Sword was the strongest sword technique that Teacherson could master. However, he was a warrior at the unity of heaven and man realm after all. His own strength was not weak. Under the combined efforts of the two people, a gap was blasted open in the door. However, it was enough for several people to enter and exit. Chu Xiu and Teacherson entered first. The others followed closely behind. However, when everyone saw the scene in the palace, they immediately gasped. Their eyes were filled with shock, including Teacherson's. Chu Xiu, after all, had transmigrated and could be considered as someone who had seen the world. After seeing the scene, he was only slightly stunned. He then murmured, "This sky-reaching martial sect really knows how to play." The things in the entire hall were extremely evil. It was like a slaughterhouse. There were broken limbs and remains of various ferocious beasts everywhere. Some had already decayed after tens of thousands of years and would shatter at the slightest touch. The bloodstains on the ground had even turned black. Of course, these were not the strangest things. The strangest thing was that there were many dead, test subjects in the surrounding cages. They were all strangely shaped. Some had the head of a deer and the body of a bird. There were also 8-legged lizards that looked like spiders. Combined with the corpses of these ferocious beasts and these strangely shaped test subjects, Chu Xiu finally understood how these things had come about. The people of the sky-reaching martial sect had been conducting biochemical experiments here. However, at this moment, Teacherson said in a slightly excited tone, as expected of an ancient martial arts sect. The sky-reaching martial sect's idea can be called genius. It is a pity that they did not succeed because of the great ancient calamity. Otherwise, they would have benefited the entire martial arts world. A warrior at the side muttered, "Creating these monsters can benefit the entire martial arts world? Other than scaring people, what's the use? They don't look delicious." Teacherson glared at the warrior and snorted coldly, "What do you know? The sky-reaching martial sect did this to mass-produce ferocious beasts. The blood of ferocious beasts can be used to refine pills, their scales can be used to refine weapons, and their bones can be used to set up arrays. It is not an exaggeration to say that their entire body is a treasure. However, ferocious beasts are hard to find and they are extremely powerful. It is not easy to kill them. It seems that the sky-reaching martial sect is preparing to transplant the blood of ferocious beasts into ordinary ferocious beasts, creating ferocious beasts out of thin air and providing an endless supply of ferocious beast materials for the martial arts world. However, it is a pity that the sky-reaching martial sect failed in the end. The monsters they created can survive, but their bodies did not retain the blood of ferocious beasts. They are just stronger and more ferocious than ordinary beasts. Chu Xiu also nodded. Teacherson was indeed worthy of being a teacher for many years. His analysis was clear and logical. The people from the sky-reaching martial sect were very innovative. However, in Chu Xiu's opinion, the possibility of success did not seem high. What they were doing was almost equivalent to creating things. It was already not easy to piece together those ferocious beasts into strange shapes and allow them to continue to survive, let alone turn ferocious beasts into ferocious beasts. The crowd continued to walk towards the depths of the hall. The center of the hall appeared in front of everyone, and it made everyone's eyes light up. There was a formation in the center of the hall. The light of the formation was a little dim, but it was still lit up. A giant heart that was 9 inches in size floated above the formation. Although its surface was already frozen, everyone could still feel the vitality within it. Chapter 356. Every part of a fierce beast was a treasure. This was what Teacherson had just said. The broken limbs of the fierce beasts in the hall had already decayed and were basically useless. However, this frozen heart was clearly still alive. Although the crowd did not know what this heart was, it was definitely a treasure. However, just as everyone approached the formation, mechanical sounds rang out from the surroundings of the formation. A mechanical puppet clad in black armor and wielding a heavy sword rose from the ground. The moment they saw the mechanical puppet, someone immediately exclaimed, "It's the Thousand Machines Sect's black armored warrior." In ancient times, the Thousand Machines sect not only produced all kinds of hidden weapons, but they were also famous for all kinds of strange mechanical devices. This black armored warrior was the most famous puppet of the Thousand Machines sect. It was said that the black armored warrior was composed of 36,000 mechanical devices and its body was inscribed with 360 miniature arrays. It could automatically absorb vitality from heaven and earth. As long as the arrays were not destroyed, the black armored warrior would not die. The strength of this black armored warrior was also incomparably strong. Its entire body was made of adamantine meteoric iron, which could withstand all attacks below the level of a divine weapon. The arrays inside could also withstand the internal energy of a unity of heaven and man realm expert. Unless a martial Dao grandmaster attacked, it would be very difficult for a unity of heaven and man realm expert to defeat it. The black armored warrior was very famous in the pugilistic world. In the past, the true martial sect, one of the 3 great Dao sects, had once excavated 8 black armored warriors from an ancient ruin. A martial Dao grandmaster had personally subdued them and changed the arrays inside, allowing them to guard the true martial sect's true martial hall. Now that this black armored warrior was guarding the place, it was almost impossible for anyone to obtain the heart. At this time, Chu Xiu suddenly transmitted his voice to Teacherson, "Elderson, how about joining forces? If we don't get rid of this black armored warrior, no one will be able to obtain the fierce beast's heart. This thing is so big, after the matter is over, we can split it in half." The corner of Teacherson's mouth revealed a trace of a sneer. "Chu Xiu, you killed my disciple, and now you want to join forces with me? You are simply delusional." Chu Xiu sneered and said, "All right, Elderson, stop acting. It's true that you value Zhang Baitao, but you absolutely don't value him enough to risk your own interests for him. Back in Northern Yan, after I killed Zhang Baitao, I joined the Blue Dragon Society. You can easily find out if you ask Wind's Sweeping Tower. Why didn't you come to the Northern Yan to take revenge on me after such a long time?" "It's all because I have the Blue Dragon Society behind me. You're afraid that you'll come all the way to Northern Yen to take revenge on me, and you'll stay in Northern Yen forever. After I joined the Guangzhong torture room, I was even closer to West Chu, so why didn't you take revenge on me? Wasn't it because they were afraid of the Guangzhong torture room's strength? Also, when I fought with Ming Chen of the Great Light Temple before, if you were really determined to kill me, I might not be able to kill Ming Chen so easily. In the end, why didn't you make a move? Wasn't it because you were worried that something might go wrong and cause you to be injured before entering the Sky-Split Tower? Eldertson, you have more than one disciple, but this is the only time you will encounter the birth of the Sky-Split Tower. Are you going to let go of your grudges and join hands with me, or are you going to watch the treasures and leave? It's your choice. Chu Xiu's words made Teacherson feel as though his heart was seen through. This made his face faintly reveal anger from embarrassment, but he didn't explode. Chu Xiu was right. In this world, as long as you wanted to take revenge, no matter how difficult or dangerous it wouldn't be an excuse. Just like when Chu Xiu crippled Shenbai and Azure Water Sword Sex Lu Gongyuan, he valued Shenbai even more than his own son. In the end, Shenbai was crippled by Chu Xiu. Lu Gongyuan also had misgivings about the Guangzhong torture room and the current Azure Water Sword sect. Therefore, he forcefully endured and didn't seek revenge from Chu Xiu. He didn't even seek an explanation from the Guangzhong torture room. Teacherson did indeed like Zhang Baitao as a disciple, but it was far less than how Lu Gongyuan valued Shenbai. Just like what Chu Xiu said, he still had many disciples. He couldn't disregard everything and give up his own safety to seek revenge from Chu Xiu just for Zhang Baitao. After a moment of silence, Teacherson transmitted a voice in a soft voice. With just the two of us, can we defeat this black armor warrior? This thing is very troublesome to deal with. Any slash from a divine weapon would be useless against it. The internal array can also withstand the inner force of a unity of heaven and man realm expert. Teacherson didn't agree to join forces, but his words were basically equivalent to agreement. However, Teacherson didn't have much face and was embarrassed to say that he wanted to join forces with Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu revealed a smirk and spoke indifferently. No matter how strong the mechanism is, it is still a mechanism. Even if it has the support of countless arrays, it is still a brainless piece of trash. There will always be a way to deal with it. However, we have to clean up the others as well. We don't want a group of scoundrels to take advantage of us after we go through so much trouble to obtain the item. Teacherson turned around to look at the rogue cultivators. At this moment, they were also staring at the frozen heart with greedy eyes. The black armor warrior wasn't easy to deal with. If they went through so much trouble to defeat the black armor warrior, it would indeed be a waste if the scoundrels took advantage of them. However, Teacherson frowned and said, "Are we just going to chase them away like this? But they haven't even tried to snatch it." After all, Teacherson was a member of the Ba Mountain Sword sect and could be considered a veteran of the Jianghu who had been famous for a long time. With his status, he still wanted his reputation. He didn't want to do something that would attract too much criticism. Chu Xiu shrugged and said, "Eldertson cares about his reputation, but I, Chu Xiu, already have a bad reputation in the Jianghu. I don't care about these things. Never mind, let me be the bad guy." As he spoke, Chu Xiu turned and walked towards those people. Previously, Chu Xiu and Teacherson had been communicating using their internal energy. With their cultivation, the others naturally couldn't hear what they were saying. Seeing Chu Xiu walk over, these people were stunned. They were about to say something when they saw Chu Xiu point at the door and say, "Get out." Everyone was stunned. Immediately, someone said unhappily, "Official Chu, what do you mean by this? What right do you have to let us out?" Chu Xiu said coolly, "Don't you know what I mean? Don't think about things that you shouldn't think about, and don't take things that you shouldn't take. This thing is right here. Even if I don't snatch it, you won't be able to take it. Since that's the case, what is the point of you staying here?" Chu Xiu's words exposed the thoughts of these people. But with the treasure in front of them, there would always be people who would be blinded by profit. Someone laughed dryly and said, "Official Chu's words are a bit too much. We have never thought about snatching something from official Chu's hands. Can't we just stand in this hall and look at some other things? Chu Xiu shook his head and said, I'm a person who rarely talks reason with others because I've always believed that fists and swords are more useful than reasoning. It's rare for me to reason with you, but in the end you don't listen. You can't blame me for this. It's not a good habit to not learn from your mistakes. Hearing Chu Xiu's words, the expressions of everyone present immediately changed. There were several cultivators from Eastern Qi who quietly stepped back and slipped out of the hall. These cultivators from Eastern Qi had heard of Chu Xiu's fierce reputation. If they wanted to snatch something from Chu Xiu's mouth, they would probably lose their lives before they could even touch it. As for the cultivators from Western Chu, most of what they knew about Chu Xiu came from hearsay. At this time, they were still clamoring that Chu Xiu's actions were too overbearing and that Tong Tian Tower didn't belong to him alone. Chu Xiu sneered and directly grabbed the cultivator who was clamoring the loudest. That cultivator's strength could not be considered weak, having a cultivation of the internal strength realm. But in the hands of an expert like Chu Xiu, he simply could not withstand a single blow. With a loud explosion, that cultivator's aura shield was directly crushed by Chu Xiu. His entire body was lifted up by Chu Xiu and thrown to the side of the black armored soldier. The black armored soldier had no intelligence and completely relied on the settings of the array to determine who was friend or foe. Someone entered its attack range. The black armored soldier raised the heavy sword in its hand. It seemed heavy, but its figure was as fast as lightning. It directly cut that cultivator in half. The severed limbs and blood sprinkled on the black armored soldier's body, looking somewhat evil. But the black armored soldier still slowly walked back to its original position and continued to hold the heavy sword in its hand, looking at the crowd with its empty eyes. Chu Xiu turned back and smiled at the crowd. Who's next? Everyone present was stunned. Without even looking back, they directly turned and fled. With the previous example in mind, they no longer doubted Chu Xiu's courage to kill. Teacherson took a deep look at Chu Xiu. Although Chu Xiu had killed his disciple, it was only today that he truly understood what kind of person Chu Xiu was. Many people in the pugilistic world cared about fame and fortune. Fame and fortune were ranked before the word fortune. Therefore, 99% of the people in the pugilistic world wanted fame. Whether it was a good reputation or a powerful reputation, they absolutely did not want a bad reputation. Even if some of the big sects in the pugilistic world wanted to kill and exterminate a sect, they would also want a good reason. Although it seemed hypocritical, this was the rule of the pugilistic world. And this Chu Xiu in front of him, he was clearly the kind of person who did not care about these false reputations. Teacherson cared about his reputation, so it was impossible for him to drive everyone away and monopolize the treasures, even though he had the same thoughts in his heart. However, Chu Xiu could do it. Chu Xiu was someone who dared to do anything. Therefore, this kind of person was the most terrifying. This was because this kind of person had no bottom line. When fighting with the other party, you would never know what methods he would use or what decisive actions he would take. At this moment, Chu Xiu did not know what Teacherson was thinking. He only said to Teacherson, Elderson, those rats have been cleaned up. Can we make our move now? You're tuning into the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.